to defeat Trump here in Texas.
For 45 years. So the wealthiest people are doing phenomenally well. Working people are going no place in a hurry. Tonight, 500,000
The senator is a driving workplace.
Americans will be sleeping out on the streets because we don't have affordable housing. Half of the people in this country live paycheck to paycheck. Now, I grew up in a family. I lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. Your car breaks down. You don't know how you're going to get the money to fix the car. Somebody in the family gets sick. You have
amazing. This is historic. You are correct. It's also in our blood to tell people when to put their pencils down. So here's how we'll do it. 1 minute for an opening statement, and then we have 3 questions.
The message I'm taking to everybody: partnership, inclusion, and honesty all over America. And everywhere I go, I'm making the case against Donald Trump because we've just got to beat him. I believe I'm the strongest candidate to do that. I believe that we can build the most effective, most diverse campaign team, just like we built here in Texas. And speaking of, let's hear it for Houston's Ashley Turner and our Texas team. So tonight, I'm asking for your help and for your vote. I hope you'll talk.
Hello, Kansas. Thank you very much. Hello, Kansas. Thank you.
Take nothing less than the interview my clients down what they call the Northeast Corridor, Amtrak corridor that goes from all the way up the coast, particularly the high-speed rail that goes from Washington to New York. And I used to interview my clients down there, and I thought things would never get better, never get better. I thought blacks and whites would never be talking. That in fact one man got tested, went in to get tested because he was doing the right thing because he had a cold and he had been in another country. And then he got a bill for $3,000.
It's 7 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. Glad you're with us. I'm Russ Lewis.
And I'm Reka Motoraj. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our digital coverage for this Super Tuesday.
Yeah, we're following the Democratic presidential primaries, of course, but also we're here tonight to keep you up to speed with all the state and local races, the stuff you're not going to get anywhere else. A lot to cover. We'll be here with the numbers and the analysis for you all night long. We know 14 states and a territory are holding primaries today. You can see Texas and California there, the biggest number of delegates up for grabs.
Yeah, and results are already coming in. We are tracking those, and you can as well. If you just text the word results to 713-526-1111, we're going to then send you a link to track those results, again, as they come in. We're already getting them. Marcelino Benito is standing by with more on those tonight. And should we go straight to Marcelino? Let's talk about what's coming in. What do you got?
Well, they call it Super Tuesday for a reason. A lot of states, and we're tracking them from across the country, so I wanted to give you a look at that map. But let's show you what's happened so far. The polls closed at 6 Central in Vermont, Virginia. It closed at 6:30 in North Carolina. And we already have projections for those 3 states. We'll get to that in a little bit. Polls just closed here at the top of the hour in states like Alabama, Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and most of Texas, including right here in Harris County. We should mention that Nashville, Tennessee, the site of those devastating tornadoes earlier today, the voting has been extended in that city until 8 o'clock Central. What we'll be watching as the night goes on, 7:30 in about half an hour, Arkansas will close. We'll start getting results from there. At 8 o'clock Central, Colorado and Minnesota. We keep moving west, where Utah will get results at 9 Central, and then California, the big prize of the night, as you mentioned, Russ, those results will start coming in at 10 o'clock Central. Now, I want to show you results, actual results that we're getting so far. So we'll pull up the big board here, and you can see we have it broken down by the entire country. Here we're going to start off with Vermont. And this, no surprise here. It is purple because purple is the color that belongs to Bernie Sanders on our map tonight. No one really surprised by this. The projection came in pretty quickly. Sanders right now projected to win by about 28 points. A solid victory. Joe Biden, though, getting delegates, 22%, almost 23% of the vote that he's earned so far, with just 15% of precincts reporting. A number, guys, that will want to keep watching most of the night is that 15% threshold. If the candidates meet that 15% mark, they'll be getting delegates, and we know this is a delegate race at the end of the day. We'll keep moving back to the map here, and we'll get a look at Virginia. Yesterday, Joe Biden was in town. I got a one-on-one interview with him. We talked a lot about what he expected to happen on Super Tuesday, and his campaign told me they felt good about where Virginia was heading. And this is a blowout right now. Biden projected to win the state. He's up right now by 32 points. With 78% of precincts reporting in Virginia, he has 54.5% of the vote. His color on the map tonight is green, and you can see all of Virginia pretty much green. Bernie Sanders may be pulling in one county there in Virginia. So this is a big win for the Biden campaign, and they expected this with heavy support from the African-American community. We'll go down here to North Carolina. They closed again at 6:30 Central. We've also projected this to be in Biden's corner. He's up right now by 12 points with 2% of precincts reporting, 35.9% of the vote. And you can see the map will start filling in green. We expect a lot of green here. Again, this state has already been called for Joe Biden. And just right when we went to this, there was another state that popped up and turned green just as we were talking about North Carolina. And polls just closed here in Alabama. And the AP is now projecting that Joe Biden will win this state. We don't have any vote totals just yet, but this is all based on exit polls from the AP. They are projecting that Joe Biden will win this state. Again, not a terribly huge surprise here. They really expected this. Again, a heavy African-American voter turnout we expect in that state, and he's doing very well with that demographic.
Well, that was the big question going in tonight, Marcelino. Would he get that South Carolina bounce? Joe Biden. And we are seeing it. He's doing well, and the latest polling showed he was going to do well in some of these states tonight where he might not have, we don't know, if he hadn't won South Carolina over the weekend. So, Marcelino, thanks. We know you're watching that board all night, and we'll be getting back to you a lot tonight. You know, the polls break closed here in Harris County 4 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But
the lines.
Yeah, people still aren't done voting.
Absolutely. So Jason Miles has been at the West Gray Multi-Service Center. You've been there all day, Jason. How long is that line still?
The longest it has been all day, guys. Take a look. We're around the tennis court, if you know where that is, and you guys are probably familiar with this building since it was near our old station location. This young lady from the clerk's office just came up with this red placard telling this lady, Lucy Boudreau, that she is the last person in line tonight, the last one who'll be voting here at the West Gray Multi-Service Center, which has been packed all day long. Walk with me. This line goes all the way around the tennis court, about 100 yards to the actual multi-service center where the voting is taking place. The Harris County Clerk's Office saying multiple polling sites today have set records. The last I checked, more than 230 some odd thousand people had voted in Harris County alone just on this election day. I had a young man I was going to talk. There he is, Austin. You moved up a little bit since we last chatted.
Yeah.
Why do you want to stand in line for so long?
You know, I think tonight the reason I came out was I'm pretty passionate about voting against Rodney Ellis. Yeah, I think the big thing behind that is you pay attention to some of the corrupt stuff that we see with some of the politicians.
Forgive me. Let's not maybe name specific
okay,
candidates
my
and
bad.
allegations, but just in general,
Sure.
why be so patient as to vote?
I think it's just, you know, everybody gets passionate about what they think is most important when it comes to voting. And so, you know, whether it be 7 o'clock at night, you know, middle of the week, I think it's important for you to go out and vote. And you know, at the end of the day, everybody's got their opinions. And I think that's what makes us special, don't you?
The presidential election in particular, the Democratic side, you know, a lot of people early voted, and their candidates may have dropped out as recently as yesterday.
Absolutely.
So waiting till the last day in some regard was a good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's beneficial because, you know, like you said, you know, their candidate could not even be here. So you really get the most information and are able to make the most educated decision with what you have. So.
And you probably have to be more patient, too.
Absolutely, yeah, patience is key.
Thank you, Austin. And as you take a look at this line, it continues to move around. It is moving at a pretty good clip, and you know the forecast initially had some rain. We are so lucky we didn't get any rain today, guys, because it's been a very pleasant day to basically stand in line. Some people have their furry companions with them. Some people brought even chairs so they could take a seat while they wait to cast their ballot. That's the latest from here at the Multi-Service Center on West Gray. For now, we'll send it back to you.
You know, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jason, we have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind. First of all, if you just show up now, for instance, to get in line there, you're not going to be allowed to vote. They've cut off the line, correct? I'm guessing.
They cut off the line. As long as you are in line, you will get to vote. It may be 8 or 8:30 by the time you cast your ballot, but you definitely will get to vote. But at this point, there's no reason to show up, because if you're not in line at that 7 o'clock mark, you will not get to vote, and that lady with the red placard will stand there and follow this line all the way in to make sure nobody cuts into that line.
Is that estimation 8 or 8:30 by the time those last people get in, or is that just a best guess at this point?
Well, the last I checked with one of the election judges here on the scene, they said the wait was about an hour to an hour and a half, so I'm just basing it on that information. It's just after 7 now, so based on that, I would say 8 or 8:30, yeah.
You know, it's interesting because you usually see this kind of turnout in a general election. You see the much longer lines. You see people, especially younger voters, come out. So to see this during a primary is very interesting. And to see those long lines, really, again, we see that typically in November. So this is kind of nice to see that everybody is going out there and doing their civic duty.
And interesting, if that one voter that Jason, you talked to is any indication, it sounds like he came out mostly for a local race. So, you know, we assume that the presidential race is what gets all these people in line, and it could be a local race they're very passionate about, the DA or a congressional seat or something. I bet you're seeing all kinds out there the more people you talk to, Jason.
That's right. If you guys can still hear me, several people I spoke to out here today had also just topics that they are really concerned about, whether it was environmental issues or social justice. So not necessarily a particular candidate or presidential candidate or local race, but just a kind of an issue. And I guess they gravitate toward a certain candidate who may share that passion for that particular issue. I've heard a lot in regards to that out here today.
Well, whatever the reason that they're there, it's encouraging to see long lines at polling stations for a primary.
We are happy to see that. All right, thank you, Jason. We're going to keep checking in with you in the next hour, but in the meantime, you know, this year's primary carries more weight than in years past. Stephanie Whitfield explains what has changed.
This Super Tuesday is different than in years past. The big reason? California. The Golden State moved its primary from June to Super Tuesday. That means 2 of the nation's most populous states will be voting on the same day, California and Texas. Texas has 228 delegates up for grabs, and California has 415 delegates. 12 other states and territories will also hold primaries on March 3rd. Altogether, that's more than a third of the U.S. population. So that's why Super Tuesday could hold more weight this time around.
Good to see you.
All right, so right now we are joined by Bob Stein and Vlad Davidyuk, Republican strategist, KHOU 11 analyst. You guys are going to be with us for the next several hours talking to us as the results
Did you know
come
that,
in.
Vlad, by the way?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Surprise! But no, this is a great night. We're so happy that you're here. We have so many questions for you guys. You know, we were talking about the turnout. I just want to kind of start with that. We saw Jason Miles' live shot. The long lines, again, something you don't necessarily see outside of November. Are you surprised by the number of people who showed up to vote?
It's perfectly predictable.
Yeah.
First of all, there are 226,000 primary Democratic votes cast in 2016. A reasonably competitive race. Of course, Bernie Sanders was on the ballot then, and so was Hillary Clinton. In early voting, that was about, in 2016, about 120,000 of that vote. So what you're beginning to see right now is that we've only had 116,000 early voters in the Democratic primary, and what you're seeing is what everybody said would happen. Everyone was waiting to see what happened in South Carolina.
Yeah. That 226 number was just Democrats?
Just Democrats in 2016.
Okay.
And so one would expect that at least we'll get that 2.25, maybe more. I actually think this is a more competitive race. It's a deeper, and I think the Bloomberg money alone accounted for a lot of turnout. Whether Bloomberg was going to get that vote for himself. But what you're beginning to see now in the lines, and those of us, the Republicans have this, Democrats have this, I get both, is a list of everybody that's already voted. So what I did last night was look at everybody that voted early. And what did they do in 2016? People like you don't vote. Anybody under 60, probably not likely to vote. And it's another story about Bernie Sanders. There's a little bit of a myth here about his support among under 35-year-olds. But what we're seeing was lots of people had voted in 2016 and had been voting early in 2016, and in fact had been voting early in every election that was available to them, didn't vote. Now, one opportunity was they weren't going to vote in this. No. I'll bet you that when we see the vote list after a couple of days, they voted on Election Day. They wanted to know who they were. These were moderate Democrats, disproportionately African-American. 60% of that African-American vote's female over the age of 60. They know exactly who they were going to vote for, and that was after they saw the victory in South Carolina. My guess is that Biden, the polling data that we saw, the U of H poll, everybody was very close with Biden and Sanders. Now I suspect that Biden's going to get an advantage.
I want to interrupt you for a second. We're going to go to Marcelino because it looks like there's some results.
Well, we have
Texas
some early results coming in, and they're from Harris County. You can see it's lit green. Less than 0%, about 0% precincts reporting, but this is really early numbers, and it goes as to what you mentioned, Bob. Super close between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, separated by 0.2% right now. Again, early. I'm assuming this is pretty much the early vote that we're seeing.
Yeah.
But it looks like a three-man race right now. Bloomberg not far behind. He's meeting that viability threshold at 21%.
And this is just Harris County?
Just Harris County.
Okay.
It's the early vote and doesn't probably include the mail ballot. They won't count the mail ballot yet. There's a weird reason for that, but these are almost exactly what polling, normally early vote will track well with Election Day. I'd be cautious, because usually it's a 60-40 early to Election Day. But since the clerk and the county adopted these Election Day vote centers, it actually has shifted towards early Election Day. And you add in this waiting to see what happened in South Carolina. My sense is if it continues like this, that's good news for Biden, because I think he's going to start running it up. Notice something that's important here. You got to have 15%.
Right.
There are only 3 candidates that are over 15. Warren is not well below. She's in range, and she might qualify. The other thing to remember is that we allocate delegates by state Senate district. Most other states do it by congressional district. But what's interesting is you may do well in one county, and you don't do well in another county. It's just like the Electoral College. You can waste votes in big Democratic counties like Harris and not do well in some of the moderate sites. I'm not talking Ector or Hidalgo. I'm talking about Bexar, Tarrant, and Dallas. So what's real important here is where is that vote for Bernie Sanders? There's a lot of talk that Bernie was getting an under 35-year-old vote. A very influential poll came out. It was written up in the Times today in the Wall Street Journal. It was a poll done on web with 40,000 respondents. And here's what's most interesting. There's a bit of a myth about Bernie's under 35. These are not new voters. What we're seeing from the annotated voter list is they may be under 35, but they've been around for a while. And these are many of the voters who in 2016 could not vote for Hillary Clinton after Bernie lost the nomination and went over and voted for Trump. Particularly in states like Wisconsin, Western Pennsylvania, even parts of Ohio and Michigan.
And there were more of those voters than people know.
Yeah,
the people who went Bernie to Trump, which you wouldn't logically
But don't
think
underestimate how many people couldn't vote for the president who were Republicans.
Right.
And this is something else. We thought it was about 4.5, But when we actually look at the voter list, that number's grown to about 8. Now, in 2016, that was sort of, nobody thought Trump was going to win. In Texas, for instance, it was not necessary that you had to vote for Trump to have him win the state. And he only won by about 9 points, 9.5. Now I think you're having some evidence that there's a lot of defection. And the poll that I'm mentioning here clearly shows that whatever Bernie brings to the table, he pushes away a lot more voters, particularly in battleground states and competitive states, including our own Texas.
Vlad's been very patient over here. So.
Yeah, and Bob's right. Bernie has a ceiling that we can see. But the other thing that's driving a lot of turnout in Harris County especially is the down ballot elections. There's a lot of really competitive races on the congressional side, the state representative side, and even for local county-wide offices, Harris County DA especially. So a lot of those races are attracting a lot of attention and driving turnout. And even though the top of the ticket is going to motivate a lot of people, those lower races are really where people are finding their grassroots activism and moving forward.
And this is really important. The Democrats took the entire slate of countywide races in 2018. Everything. From judge.
It was a wipeout.
It was a complete wipeout. So what happened? Go back about 20 years and you saw the Republicans doing that, not just in Harris, but statewide. Right after that, you got the rise of the Tea Party movement. The analog to the Tea Party movement is AOC, progressives, democratic socialists. You can call it what you want. It didn't have a name. And this is it.
Yeah.
Many of the candidates that are challenging for county attorney, district attorney, Commissioner District Number 1, Rodney Ellis, and of course the county treasurer, are progressive candidates. Bernie Sanders came down and actually endorsed Kim Ogg's opponent, Audie Jones. And I think many of them are going to go to runoffs. I think there are at least 2 or 3 of those races that go to runoffs. This is what happens when the party gets so dominant that instead of worrying about the general election, the fight is in the primary.
They're following the same example the Republicans did
very much.
like 10 years ago, where the shift started to happen, where they're starting infighting, and because the competitiveness is not outside, it's within.
And this is where the Republicans have a breakthrough. Jessica Malone, I don't mean to take business, or is a good friend, and Jessica said something a couple of years ago in 2018. Well, we're dead. We'll never be able to turn the county again. I said, no, don't underestimate the Democratic Party. If they eat their own, if in fact Ann Bennett, Kim Ogg, Vince Ryan lose or are forced out, then it's an open seat. What's the best chance for the out party to win a seat? First, make certain it's an open seat.
Right.
And so the danger here is that these runoffs, and I might note here, this is something that doesn't get widely publicized. The number of African American female candidates for judgeships is phenomenal. And where are we seeing, I will say when the dust settles, the biggest turnout will be in the African American community, which is a declining portion of the electorate, but boy, they punch well above their actual numbers on the voter list.
I want to stop you for just a second. I first want to mention that our viewers who are watching on Facebook Live, or if you're watching on YouTube, obviously if you have questions for Bob or Vlad, please put them in the comments. We are definitely going to be reading those back to you guys, and we'd love to have you answer viewer questions.
We have plenty of time for that tonight too. So I will be,
we'll be here.
Send them in, and if it's a legit question, we'll get it to the experts here and get you an answer. Let's go to Adam Bennett right now, who's at Election Central. Let's check in with him, see how it's going down there. What are you up to, Adam?
So, Rush, just a couple minutes ago, we saw the county clerk staff running into the media room here with printouts of all the early voting results, which sounded like Marcelino was talking about just a second ago. Of course, now we're waiting for the election day results, and as of just a few minutes before the polls closed, nearly 254,000 people had voted today in Harris County, with many, many more in line. We heard from Jason Miles just a short time ago over at the West Gray Center. The other polling site we've been hearing about is over at Texas Southern University. There were about 350 people still in line there as of about half an hour ago when I last got an update. And the Harris County Clerk's Office was actually sending 14 more voting machines over there. So there were 10, now there are going to be 24. So I don't know what the wait time estimate was before, but hopefully that'll speed things up for a lot of people there that have been waiting in line. Now the county clerk did put out a tweet saying that her office proposed a joint primary election, which would have allowed voters to vote on any available machine. She said the parties rejected that, so both the Republicans and Democrats got an equal number of machines for each polling location. But so far in Harris County today, from the data we've seen, turnout so far, it's been about 2-to-1 Democrat votes to Republican. Now the system that they're using this year is actually pretty different for how they count the votes. They're hoping it'll help them tally them up faster. So instead of all the election judges driving the results to one location downtown, they're actually having them bring them to 4 drop-off points, and then law enforcement will drive them the rest of the way to this central vote counting center here in the Spring Branch area. And this one is actually bigger than the one they had downtown. It also has more machines, which they say as soon as you put those mobile ballot box cards in with the results, it can get them uploaded in seconds. So again, the real challenge here is just that so many people have come out to vote today, and so many people are still in line that it could be a while until some of these polling places close. But the county clerk tells me that as soon as everybody in line has voted at each of these locations, both the Democrat and Republican election judges will bring those results to the drop-off points, and they'll bring them over here. Their goal is to try to update them every 45 minutes to an hour or so that they can be having results coming in steadily throughout the night. But of course, it could be a while to get all of them in just because we have seen such tremendous turnout today. Back to you guys.
Adam, thank you.
Good problem to have.
Yeah,
they have a lot of votes.
Yeah.
You know, so we may get the numbers a little later than we thought. But let's get over to, I think we need to go to Marcelino right now. I see you messing with the board there.
Yeah, you guys can come to me.
Maybe I came to you too early.
No, we're good. We're good.
Numbers, right?
We're good. Yes,
okay,
we do
cool.
have new numbers. So just to tell our viewers, you're going to see the map changing throughout the night. When it gets a darker color, that means we've projected that state to go to a candidate. So when you see the lighter purple, that means Biden, Sanders is in the lead. When you see a lighter green, that means Biden is in the lead. And until it gets dark, nothing's been projected. But if we go in here to Oklahoma and try to get a look at results there, we see a lot of different candidates' colors. It's the first time we're seeing a little bit of Mike Bloomberg's color, which is the darker orange, I guess, on the map. Still very early in terms of 5% of the expected vote out there, but you can see a tight race. Joe Biden up by 2 percentage points. Again, very early, very tight race with Bernie Sanders. But again, that 15% threshold that we're going to be talking about all night. Right now, Michael Bloomberg will get some delegates if these numbers tend to hold up throughout the night. Elizabeth Warren close to that 15% threshold, just missing it by 0.2%. Again, very early numbers. That is in Oklahoma. If we go out, let me fuzz through the board here 1 second. We go back out here, another state we haven't discussed tonight that is light green at the moment, that is Tennessee. Again, very early, just 1% of precincts reporting, but Joe Biden maintaining a 5 percentage point lead against Michael Bloomberg. The first time we've seen Michael Bloomberg in second in any of these contests. He spent a lot of money there. His campaign was there yesterday on the eve of Super Tuesday. And again, we're starting to see some orange. It'll be interesting to see how this shakes up for Michael Bloomberg. He's in that delegate battle right now, in Tennessee at least. Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, and Bernie Sanders all getting delegates. Again, though, we've got to clarify it's very early in that race. And if we come back to Texas, let's get back to the board. Texas, again, the color keeps changing. Light purple. It changed from the last 5-10 minutes when we were talking to Bob. Right now, Bernie Sanders is in the lead, 16% of the expected vote. Very few precincts reporting at this time, but you can see he's starting to build up a little bit of a buffer, 3% lead right now, and you can see the colors are starting to fill in on this map. Things changed for Bernie Sanders in Texas when this county up in Dallas, Collin County, came in. He has a 7 percentage point lead up there. That sort of buffered his lead statewide. And the first time we're seeing yellow on the map, that's Elizabeth Warren down in Travis County. First time we've seen Joe Biden polling third in any of the counties in Texas. He's just 9% of the vote right now. But again, very early, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren actually just jumping up to second place in Texas. So Joe Biden now down at third. So something we'll have to keep watching in Texas.
Going into Austin, which is a college town where Bernie Sanders should be very strong, and it would be worth looking at.
Travis County?
Travis, yeah.
Yep,
Looks
there
like
you go.
Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren away with it.
Yeah.
Very early,
well,
though.
it's at 1% right now.
Yeah, very early.
Yeah, it's early lead.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, very early.
Yeah, a lot of votes, though.
But things will be changing throughout the night in Texas.
That's not a mail absentee ballot.
Just want to, real quick, Marcelino, people are checking him on Facebook. Just want to acknowledge them right now, letting us know what it's like out there as they stand in line. So I'll tell you what Brittany's telling us, that Lone Star College Victory Center. She says it's crazy here. Elena says long line in Sugar Land. Hortensia says Sutton Elementary has a long line as well. So 3 different people, 3 different polling locations checking in, saying
it's
nuts.
worth noting here. You guys get where are the weather persons? The projection was for rain in the morning.
There was.
So
David
all
Paul
the
was talking about
candidates
that. Yeah.
were the ones I talked to were putting all their emphasis on the 5 o'clock vote. So when you looked at the 7 to 9, it was really light. and people were anticipating
They
it
have to
was
work
going to
well.
rain. So they said, you know what, I make, night before, I take the kids to school, I do whatever I have to, I'm going to vote at 5. And so I think some of these lines, I know the clerk's going to get some criticism, but one of the hardest things to predict, particularly in terms of a primary, is what's going to happen, and particularly the late deciders.
Let's talk about the Harris County District Attorney's race. Let's talk about these numbers. Are we surprised by these numbers for Kim Ogg?
I am. I thought Kim Ogg had a good chance of winning this outright, and it's early. But I thought when Audie Jones got endorsed by Bernie Sanders, and there's a real issue here. Kim campaigned on bail reform. Then, of course, she gets in and wins. And as is often the case, it's a lot easier to campaign for an office than to run that office. And I think that she did, and I happen to agree with her, regardless of partisanship. She recognized what many of the Republican commissioners had said, it's not going to be that easy, and the judges. And she asked for more staff, and she asked for at least thinking about how to do what they call the algorithm. But Audie, who had been her aide, or another assistant district attorney, said that's wrong. And they came in with what I call the schism. And she's not run a particularly strong campaign, but I think what she was able to do is, of course, mobilize voters. And being African American in a city where the African American vote, as I said, punches well above its numbers, she's now, I would have thought this would have been 50-51, but 59. Yeah, this is not.
Interesting to me that all three of the people on the screen there with her are all former prosecutors in that office.
Yes, it's not surprising. I mean, Bob was mentioning how Kim Ogg had gone to Commissioner's Court asking for more resources, asking for more staff, and she was actually fighting against Commissioner's Court, trying to get these things done because she was not really making a whole lot of progress.
And it was a Democratic. This is the crazy thing. Garcia gets elected. Of course, Lena Hidalgo's now the county judge, so they had a majority. And they ran together. And again, sometimes politics makes more than strange bedfellows. It's much more difficult to govern, and the Democrats have been out in, so to speak, the wilderness for so long. I think they just didn't know what was going on. The one that's surprising, if we get the Vince Ryan one, Vince is getting pretty. I mean, Menfee is, of course, endorsed by the Chronicle, which probably helps.
Harris County attorney we're talking about.
Yeah, but Vince Ryan is a long-time elected official, not only as the county judge, county attorney, but he was on city council for many years, going back a long time. And
a lot of people think he's worn out his welcome down. He's had a lot of flubs. He's made a lot of mistakes that have gotten some of the wrong people upset at him, and he's attracted a lot of negative attention. He's brought a lot of negative attention to that office. So this is an excellent opportunity to.
And of course, he fought the bail reform. He sided. I mean, one could say it was his job to be the attorney for the county judges. But that didn't make him any more endeared to Democrats. And then he had, as I think you've pointed out, bad press. Just bad. And he didn't get endorsed. And being a long-term incumbent and not getting endorsed is a.
Are either of these races, the DA or the county attorney, is tonight the election, or is it competitive in November?
I think if the incumbents don't get renominated,
it's almost an open seat.
It's an open seat.
Then it's a race.
It would be a race at that point. Just because of the strength of incumbency is so powerful. Without that force there,
in fact, the irony here is you would think a multi-year incumbent like Vince would be the one that was running the 59, and it would be Kim, who just got elected 4 years ago. I mean, what was a landslide, of course, for the Democrats in 2016 in Harris. So I think. I'll give you two other explanations, and a consultant here can comment. I don't think Vince ran much of a campaign, whereas I think Kim did. No. Kim ran a campaign. She ran like she was really in trouble, and I think Vince had a little bit of what I call a social website type of presence, but I didn't see that campaign, and I looked at the campaign filings. Vince is not a young guy either. I mean, he's maybe just thinking this is the last hurrah. But I'm surprised at this. It is early, and I'm not certain that is any more than just mail-in ballots at this point. But
he's getting trounced at this point.
It doesn't bode well. It doesn't bode well. Just saying that.
All right, let's go to Janelle Bluda. She's at a Democratic Watch Party. Is she available? Okay, so we're going to stand by for her in just a minute. Let's.
Can we get the Ann Bennett race, the county treasurer race? Oh, this is an interesting one.
County commissioner.
Precinct 3.
Yeah, I am surprised about Diana Alexander. I would have thought Morris Overstreet would be in there. He's again, of course, African American, former state Supreme Court judge, many years ago, and but Morris looks like he's going to be going into a runoff for certain. I don't think any of them are going to get anything above you know, that 30 or 40%.
This is the race that I've been interested in seeing. Former city councilwoman Brenda Stardig was running a very strong campaign going all across Houston, but she fell just disastrously short.
We need to hold on just 1 second, Vlad. We want to go to Mike Bloomberg, who is speaking tonight. Where is he? Do we know?
West Palm.
He's in West Palm Beach. All right, let's go to Mike Bloomberg.
Enthusiasm they don't lack. All across America, I've been talking with voters, and my message is simple. I am running to beat Donald Trump. And to start rebuilding our country and to start getting things done. And I mean big, important things like stopping gun violence and fighting climate change and finally achieving affordable health coverage for all Americans. This is a campaign for change, a campaign for sanity, for honesty, a campaign for inclusion, compassion, competence, and a campaign for human decency. And this is a campaign to bring our country back together and put the United back in the United States of America. That's the message I've been delivering not only to Democrats, but also to swing voters who will actually decide who will be our next president. And tonight we proved something very important. We proved we can win the voters who will decide the general election. And isn't that what this is all about? Now, while my fellow candidates spent a whole year focusing on the first 4 states, I was out campaigning against Donald Trump in the states where the election will actually be decided, like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pittsburgh and Ohio and North Carolina and, of course, Florida. President Obama proved that a Democrat can win all of those states, but in 2016, we lost them all. Well, I'm running to win them back. And together, we're going to get it done. Now, we all know Trump's strategy: attack Democrats, make their plans look unrealistic, unaffordable, and undoable. That won't work against us. Our plans are sensible, workable, and achievable, and we have the record and the resources to defeat Trump in swing states the Democrats lost in 2016, like Florida.
I mean, he had been on the ballot.
All right, Mike Bloomberg tonight, looking ahead. He is in Florida. They're not voting today, but he's looking forward to going forward and rallying the troops there and doing well in some states tonight.
Yeah, he's got quite a crowd there. We're going to go now to Ron Trevino, though, back here at home. 22nd Congressional District Republican primary out there. It looks like a party run, but what's happening there? What are folks saying?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm coming to you from Richmond, which is in the 22nd District out here. This is the campaign party headquarters tonight for a number of Republicans, but the main one, Troy Nehls, the sheriff out here, who is hoping to replace Pete Olson, who's been the longtime Congress member from here, who is retiring. But he's just one of many people vying for that seat. He will be out here later tonight. This is one of the most important congressional seats in the area. When you talk about, is Texas going to go blue? Well, let's see what happens in this district, because whoever wins here in terms of the Republican, they might have a tough time against the Democrat, the eventual Democratic nominee in the general election. Let's talk to some of the people who voted today. Robert, did I get your name right, Robert?
Yes, sir.
Come join us here on KHOU. We're on live online. First of all, what was voting day like for you? Did you vote today or did you vote early?
I actually early voted. So we got a big group of our people over at the office and all went down and did some early voting because we were excited about this election.
And you're a big Troy Nehls supporter.
I'm a supporter of the Nehls family. Yes, I really am. He's done a great job in the community. He's done a great job. Both his brothers, their whole family is really good group of people. Done a lot of good things for the
very competitive race.
Yes, sir.
Pete Olson throwing his support to Pierce Bush. That's a big name, obviously, the Bush political dynasty. That's a big obstacle for. How big of an obstacle was it for Mr. Nails campaigning against a Bush family member?
Well, I think it could be a large obstacle in itself, but I think his big plus would be the fact that he actually lives in the community. So you know how people come in from out of district and try to be part of a community that they not really are part of normally. And the Nails family has been a part of the community for a long time, and that's really a big plus for me and the people that I know.
Mr. Bush does live here now.
Yeah, they do
but
now.
Perhaps not as long as Mr. Nails.
Oh, yeah, you know.
Okay, now how about this whole idea about Texas becoming blue? Pete Olson almost lost to a Democrat the last election. Does that worry you as a Republican?
It does. I mean, it concerns me a little bit because, I mean, as a conservative, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm so far right or anything of that nature, but it's a little nerve-wracking to see how blue the state has become over the last several elections. So it is a concern. I hope that that's not the case, but all I can do is vote and hope for the best.
Well, I was talking to our political expert, Bob Stein, earlier today, and he believes that Mr. Nails and Mr. Bush will end up in a runoff.
I think they're hoping to get to that runoff for sure today, and I hope they do, and we'll go out and vote again and try to talk as much as we can about who we'd like to see get into that election. But either of them probably will end up doing a fairly good job. I mean, I would like to definitely see a Republican get that seat no matter what. But at the end of the day, we're gonna be pushing for Mr. Nails to win.
So what do you think's going to happen in a few hours? You guys going to be cheering or crying?
I hope we're cheering. I hope we're cheering. You know you can't read these things until the last minute.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. All right, of course, we'll be watching what happens out here in Congressional District 22. If you're not familiar with District 22, it is one of the most important districts out here. Fort Bend County, parts of Brazoria County, and parts of Harris County. One of the most contested races in the state, getting a lot of attention because of so many people running. You get the Bush family involved. We were at the Bush headquarters a couple of hours ago. We'll probably be going back there again tonight and checking in with the Democrats as well. Just hopping all around Congressional District 22. Our gas tank is full, so we're okay as far as that's concerned. Russ Sareka, back to you in the studio.
Ron, thank you so much. Ron is in Richmond right now talking about this congressional race. A lot of big names in this one, guys. Let's talk about the big names here. Obviously, Pete Olson endorsing Pierce Bush, who recently moved to that area.
Grandson of the former president of HW. Yeah. And you have Troy Nehls, the outgoing Fort Bend County Sheriff. And a host of others on both sides. I mean, let's start with the Republicans here. This is just really, really interesting.
Well, it's a very interesting dynamic because you had a lot of candidates who may not have been on the radar at the outset. Everyone kind of, a while ago, everyone just thought it was going to be Troy Nehls just coming in like a powerhouse and taking out. A lot of the other candidates walked in, started making some progress. Kathleen Wall, Pierce Bush, Greg Hill, all really motivated some voters. But at the end of the day, what you're seeing is District 22 is split up in 3 different counties, and so that affects the way that voters turn out because Troy Nehls may be able to pull a lot of weight in Fort Bend County, but not so much in Brazoria, not so much in Harris, whereas some of the other candidates have a little bit more crossover appeal. So those votes are kind of splitting up in that direction.
You know, I think you're absolutely right. I had the privilege to talk to Pierce Bush. He called one day at a behest of a friend, but it was like 2 months ago. I mean, there were a lot of candidates who thought of running, but nobody did. And I think the former county sheriff, who's famous for having arrested or at least stopped a woman with an expletive bumper sticker about the president, got a lot of press. But I think you're absolutely right that the county it's 3 counties. Fort Bend is the core of it, but it's a rapidly changing county. I mean, this is Tom DeLay's old House district. And the rise of South Asian voters particularly is clearly signaled a guy like Sri Kulkarni, who ran against Pete Olson, of course, 2 years ago and came within, maybe 3-4 points of taking that seat.
46% last time.
Yeah. And in fact, Pete Olson didn't win a majority because it was a third-party libertarian. I think this seat's really up for grabs. If it's a Pierce Bush, I think the Republicans can hold it. If it's a Troy Nehls, if it's Ms. Wall, I don't think they hold this seat. So they really have a narrow. I think Bush, I'm betting on Nehls getting into the runoff. His brother is running for county sheriff. His number is Trey. So you can kind of walk in there and see 2 Nels and 2 Treys and a Troy.
Yeah.
No, I think that helps.
I want
mean,
to
it's
ask
crazy,
you a
but it
little bit
helps.
about Kathleen Waldo. We see the commercials. Tell us a little bit more about her as a candidate.
Well, she's a longtime Republican activist and grassroots operative. She's a big donor to a lot of candidates and the party statewide. She has a lot of connections within the party, and her involvement in Congressional District 22 is I don't want to say it's new, but at the same time, there's not a huge amount of history there.
Yeah.
But she connects with a lot of the Republican activists and a lot of the precinct chairs who are in that congressional district, and that's the main source of what she's been doing. That said, her history is not as deep as somebody like Troy Nils or Greg Hill, and it probably on par with Pierce Bush because they both kind of came in and right around the same time. But in terms of how she's able to reach out, she's banking on those old relationships she has in the Republican Party.
Is Pierce Bush in trouble here? It sounds like that he was a kind of a late comer to this race, a late comer to the district, and a lot of advertising I see from him on the air. The first picture he uses is of Grandma and Grandpa, and he wants you to know, who they are.
We should mention, you guys couldn't hear the interview, but Ron Trevino was speaking to a man out there saying, the Nels family has been here and they've lived here for a long time, and they have, of course Bush is the name recognition there, but the Nels family has been there for quite a while, and Pierce Bush recently moved to that district.
And let's look at these numbers real quick while you talk, Vlad. So that's the early numbers.
Yeah, and that looks a bit difficult for Pierce at this stage. His involvement with being CEO of Boys Club,
Boys and Girls Club,
and has kind of cemented him in the minds of a lot of people as somebody who's very connected to the community. That said, he was a late comer to this race. He didn't really have a chance to energize his voters, energize his supporters, cement himself as somebody who's part of the community, and he's worked to do that. But it appears it may have been too little, too late.
Yeah, I mean, this is about what, 1,900 votes. I wouldn't want to make too much of it. I think the idea that this is a district where having deep roots is important, maybe in the primaries, but come the general election, it's pretty clear that Pierce Bush has the RNC wants him. Congressman McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, they want someone like Bush. Why? Because this is not, you won't win this just by bringing out Republican primary voters. Primary voters don't predict anything in a general election. They're a really fine distillate. So I think at this point, what you want to look for is, can Bush get into the runoff? Yeah. If he can get into the runoff, I think then the whole world changes because the turnout will drop, money will really matter, and that's when I think somebody like Bush brings in the kind of money that I don't think of Greg Hill, or for that. Maybe Kathleen Walsh, she's in that runoff with, then it's an expensive race, but I think the RNC, the party, does not want someone like Kathleen Walsh.
Well, you look at who endorsed Pierce Bush. He was endorsed by Congressman Olson. He was endorsed by former Congressman Ted Poe. So he has a lot of these big heavyweights behind him that he can bank on to get those voters out and connect the idea of him being that representative that they're looking for. If he can get into the runoff, he'll be able to bank on that.
So he's going to get in the top two tonight to get into that runoff, and we don't know where these votes have come from.
No.
So you're right, 3 different counties. Greg Hill is doing real well, but who knows? That may be the Brazoria County vote that's come in before the others. I don't know.
Yeah. Following this is you have to go to 3 websites and basically watch the vote.
So
and I think
1%.
Yeah, and I don't think any one county even has 50% or more. I think the most is a Fort Bend, and it might be 38, maybe 40% of the vote. Hard to figure with Republican primary votes. So it's. I think this is when you wait till tomorrow morning.
I think this is the most interesting race of the night for me locally, just because of the names and how many people there are on both sides, and it's an open seat, as you guys have mentioned.
And the other is lots of people. I mean, there are seats like the Hurd seat in El Paso where I think the Democrats picked that seat up pretty easily. But this is a seat. There's also the one for Chip Roy, where, of course, Wendy Davis is running. But this is a race where I think if Republicans don't hold this seat, they'll know why. They would have nominated the wrong candidate. If it's not Pierce Bush, bringing the party back to some core, how can I say this, successes. When the Bushes ran this state, whether it was George W., his father as president, they were able to get crossover Democrats. Since then, the demography's changed in the district dramatically, and what you're beginning to see is the party has to find itself. It's why they've been doing voter registration, why they're actively supporting Wesley Hunt, for instance, for the nomination against Lizzie Fletcher in the 7th, because they know they've got to bring in some females, They hardly have any women in the House of Representatives, even fewer in the State House. They need to diversify, and that also means age. And I think in some ways, Pierce Bush is that. He's that new generation of Republicans who hasn't lost faith in free trade or in the core values of the Republican Party, but isn't, how can I put this, ugly, is not ugly. And I think when you look at a Kathleen Wall, that's the other side of the coin. She's strident, and I saw an ad tonight talking about godless socialists. That's just not the kind of rhetoric that's going to carry a bipartisan win, or at least getting some Democrats to come over.
You talked about the look of this district changing as well. You mentioned Sri Kulkarni, who came very close to Pete Olson in the last election. Tell us more about him as a candidate, why he's appealing obviously to the South Asian crowd that's in Fort Bend County, but is he doing well?
Well, I mean, he did well in 2018. He was active in the Markovitz race against Gates for the open seat, the service seat. I think what Kulkarni represents is what that Democratic Party is. It's mostly non-Anglo, mostly diverse, mostly young, and what you see in the Republican Party is an older Anglo, and I think both parties are struggling to break out of that mold, but the Republicans are having more difficulty. The rise, I mean, this is a district that Tom DeLay pretty much represented. It obviously in different parts, covered a little bit less of Brazoria, more of Fort Bend, and a lot of Harris. But when he was in there, it became a majority-minority district. The school district's majority-minority, Hispanic and African-American. Whether you go out to, the consolidated school districts in Katy, or you go out to Lamar, these are non-Anglo districts. But they're not your stereotypes. They're middle and upper middle class. There's a large South Asian population, doctors, lawyers, the med center, and of course the whole growing industry out in that county. And they look around at the president, who's been somewhat less than hospitable to people, non-Anglos, and they say, this is not what we want. Now, Pierce Bush, I think, can overcome that.
You agree with that? You agree with that? I think his message it has been very well received. You see Pierce going to lots of events that are local, where there are lots of local minority focused organizations and clubs and groups, going to Indian American events, Pakistani American events, South Asian events. And so you see him trying to connect with those communities and actually making headway. And his time as CEO of this big organization gives him the ability to show that he has leadership potential with a lot of these groups that actually value that kind of bridging of the gap.
Look at what Big Brothers is. When you actually look at the organization, it's mostly young men of color. I think what Bush represents is what I think George W. used to call that sort of compassionate conservatism. It's a phrase that Tea Party people almost dismissed, were derisive of. But the fact is, the Bushes were well respected and revered, not just because of their Republican core values, but because they could reach out to a wide cross-section. If you remember, it was George W.H. Bush who had his first Secretary of Education, the former superintendent of HISD.
Let's go back to Marcelino now with a look at some more results that are coming in.
Well, guys, we're looking at Texas again in the presidential side of things in the Democratic primary. We got 21% of precincts reporting, so the numbers are going up. And Bernie Sanders building a 6% lead, 28% to 22% for Joe Biden. A lot of green on the map for Joe Biden, still a lot of purple. Here in Harris County, if we come in here, we're not getting today's results. These are still early voting, so I'm assuming, Bob, that would change things once we get today's vote.
Yeah.
But Sanders is building up that lead. When I spoke to the Biden campaign yesterday, they told me they were pretty confident that these endorsements that would come would sway Texas their way, that it'd be close, but that they could pull it off. Right now, I'm curious your take, Bob. What do you think?
I think, and again,
is it too early?
I think these are early votes. So I would have expected Bernie to have a lead. 6 is a big lead. I would have expected it to be 3 or 4. But the interesting point is, when we get the election day vote, I think what you'll see is that Biden wins the election day vote, and in counties like Harris, that could be 60 or more % of the total vote. I think this can flip. In fact, I'll go so far as to say I think Biden and Sanders will probably be dead even when the night's over. If anybody, it'll be Biden, and that'll be proof of what he thought would happen.
And Bob, explain when you say, this early vote. The Joe Biden campaign was dead and buried allegedly a week ago. You're saying a lot of these people may have voted when that was still the case. Today's vote flips because now the campaign's
There's
back.
no question. There were a lot of people who were trying to decide, am I going to vote early or should I wait till Nevada? Because Nevada hadn't happened yet, the caucuses, and we still, of course, didn't have South Carolina. I think what you're seeing with the long lines, along with the rain, or at least the predicted rain, is there are a lot of voters who, after they saw South Carolina, said, I'm moderate. I don't know if I should be voting for Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Bloomberg, or Biden. And the answer was Biden. And I think Bloomberg is also getting some benefit here. And I think what you're beginning to see is what's happening to Warren. There are two progressives, two moderates, and what you're beginning to see is that one of those progressives is losing out, and that is Warren. The interesting question is, what does Bloomberg take from Biden? These are two candidates of really the same dimensions, but Bernie now looks like he is the progressive candidate. But I think, and it's particularly, I think, in two communities, African American, which make up 30% of the Harris County vote, actually they're 30% of the Texas Democratic primary vote as well, and Latinos. Hispanic voters were going for Bernie. We saw that evidence in Nevada. We saw it in a little bit in South Carolina, where there were some significant bastions of Hispanic voters. That's a big question, particularly in the Valley. I want to see how Bernie comes out of that, Hidalgo and Zapata, Edinburgh. But I'm guessing now that Biden's strategy has been get the endorsements. He got a big infusion of money. He has no campaign. He had no organization in this state. Bernie, he's had it for 4 years. Yeah. So he's been able to just turn the knob up a little bit. He raises money from lots of people, significant amounts. If Biden stays even with them, again, we'll see how the pundits, you and I.
Well,
but I think this will be it'll be beginning of the coalescing around the
Valley also will tell in terms of how people like Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke were able to help Biden or not help him at all. Yeah. We'll be able to see what the effect of that will be.
What's striking to me, too, is you got 70 plus, now just changed, so almost 80,000 votes that people cast early for Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar before this endorsement, before they stepped out of the race. Those are votes that
people
obviously
feel like they threw away their vote.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strategy in a lot of this, and a lot of people are wondering, can we do a system where I can write first, second, and third place, and whoever drops out, can we do that?
Rank-ordered voting, of course, is in Maine was a big issue. And of course, the Arnold Foundation and John Arnold is a strong advocate of rank order voting. If nothing else, it does, of course, avoid the problems of having to come back in May. What's the turnout in the May runoff election? 3%? We're talking. Oh, okay, we're going over there. I'm moving.
We're walking around a lot.
You're on our set.
But this is and it's very costly. I mean, it costs a fortune, and the parties pay for this. The county doesn't pay. You must remember, this is not an election that the state runs, or the county runs, or the city. They administer it for the parties, but the parties have to pay their own money. And that raises some rather interesting questions about whether or not the parties might actually support an instant runoff.
Ranked choice voting then cut some of that a little bit?
Yeah, you wouldn't have a runoff.
Yeah.
You just have one. There's a lot of gaming in this. Consultants make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Advising candidates, and if they take away an election, that's one opportunity not. Also, candidates know that they can win runoffs over their challengers if they have more money.
I want to stop you guys real quick here because we want to get back out to Jason Miles. We're almost an hour after the polls were supposed to close out at the West Gray Service Center, but there were lines at 7, so those people get to vote. Jason, what's it look like right now?
Those people do get to vote, but it may be 9:30. That's the latest estimate from poll workers here at the West Gray Multi-Service Center. Sergio, the photographer, is walking all the way toward the end of this line. A fellow named Damien is lucky enough to be the last one. He's bringing up the rear here at the polling location, and he's willing to wait, he said. Polling officials gave him a red placard that signifies the last person in line. No one else will be allowed in line, but if you are in line, you will get to vote, whether that be 9:30 or 10 o'clock tonight. And folks like Juniper over here, you're willing to wait tonight. Tell me why.
I want to get Trump out of office. I want to support universal health care. I want to believe the system works. I just want to do my part.
What do you think of the turnout?
I'm impressed. Of course, this is Montrose, so it's believable that there will be a lot more people here for Democratic primaries, but I'm impressed, and even for just a primary election.
Juniper, you bring up a good point, and I meant to mention this earlier, guys. This is for the Democratic primary, this extremely long line, and of course the Democratic presidential primary is the hotly contested one. I can tell you, poll workers come out periodically and ask people, are you here to vote Republican? That line is much shorter. That may be indicative of this district, indicative of this year's races. But in any event, the Democratic line here at the West Gray Multi-Service Center, extremely long. The Republican line, not as long. Of course, that may have been different in 2016 when you had a different dynamic. It's just election to election, I suppose. But certainly the Democratic line much longer. That's where you see these hundreds of people still in line at as we approach 8 o'clock or so. But as we've been saying all day, the Harris County clerk, and I've been texting her all night, telling me that several polling locations, and I suspect this will be one of them, setting records today due to this vote. The last I checked was about 230+ thousand voters casting ballots today alone. That's a lot of folks, guys.
And we're not done yet. 9 or 9:30 at least tonight before those folks get to the end of the line.
Originally, he had said 8 or 8:30, so we're pushing it back by another hour. Jason, thank you so much. And for those of you who are watching us online on KHOU.com or our YouTube page, of course, we are following your comments and your questions. In fact, I wanted to ask you, Bob, about Marianne Hinton. We were saying that in Cyprus, she says that they are separated into 2 different rooms based on party affiliation. Is this correct? Are you allowed to do this?
Oh, yeah. No, again, the parties get to call the shots on virtually all of this. There are federal laws and Voting Rights Act, and there are minimum requirements for how many polling machines you have to have and how many poll judges per 10,000 voters. But basically, what happens is each county clerk meets with the parties. They make an agreement about where they're going to actually hold the election and whether the Republicans want another building or another room. And depending on the equipment, there are 2 dominant machines in the state of Texas. One's called ESNS, the other one's called HARC Internet. HARC is a little bit more flexible, but not that flexible. You can go in and tell the county, the poll worker, I want to vote in the Democrat, and they give you a number. Nobody else hears that. You go, and when you type in that number or move the dial around, up comes the Republican or the Democratic ballot. In Fort Bend, Missouri, they use ESNS machines. No, in Missouri they use ESNS, HARCs, and they have to physically separate you. And so it raises an interesting question. If you're a Democrat or a Republican and you go into an area and there's only Democrats or only Republicans, do you feel like you're in the wrong camp?
Not
Are
really
you going to the wrong
ballot,
church?
yeah.
And the vote's supposed to be secret, and that includes which party you want to vote for. So it does raise an interesting question. I've not known of any litigation over this, and there are 254 counties in the state. The equipment, really, the voting equipment, makes that decision pretty quickly. Also, the parties have increasingly come to agree to be in the same location because the county that runs the election says, well, then the expense really goes up. If you want your own voting place, the party has to pay for everything, security, and new Homeland Security rules. This is what got the clerk in difficulty in the last election in 2019 for mayor. She wanted to send in the results by telephone, but they weren't over a secure telephone line. Homeland Security has new guidelines for the transmission of actual voting data. And so now she has to bring everybody to sort of what we call regional centers. Then they can be transferred over a secure line. There's some debate over that.
That's why we didn't get the results until 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, Stan Standard said it could have been done more efficiently, but I think in fairness to Stan, the new Homeland Security rules, called NHTSA, presumably to protect us from hacking and the Russians or the Klingons or somebody, this is what we have to have.
So to answer her question, that it's perfectly normal, but if she lived somewhere else,
it would be different.
It might be different.
It might be different, absolutely.
No separating, but I could see that. I could see you going in and you don't want to let people know which party you're voting for that day. Maybe you're an independent, and today you choose to go to the Democrat or Republican side. You don't want people to know, but you're put into a room and you're
unfortunately,
publicly
it is a matter of public record. So that when the final vote is tallied, there is an official register of where, when, and how you voted. Where you voted, the location, the day, the time.
Not who I voted for, but the party I voted
with. But the party you voted
in.
So I can see all the Democratic primary voters and get their names and addresses, which is what every campaign collects, but not how you voted.
But only professors like you do stuff like that.
No, I think they're consultants.
Okay, there's consultants.
They have to.
This woman's worried about probably doing it at the polling place where everybody's watching.
I think it's a shaming. And there's some evidence, there's actually some research, that people will walk out of a line and leave the polling place under the following conditions: long lines, waiting times, and the possibility that they're being shamed because they're voting in one or the other party. Sadly, other able people oftentimes leave when they can't get access to one of the e-poll books, which is supposed to be available for other handicapped people. And there may have been 2 people using it. They won't wait, and they leave.
Are these numbers changed at all here for Harris County Attorney?
No.
They're about the same, don't they?
Yeah, they were. Those are the.
So Christian Menifee, the challenger, right now soundly beating the incumbent, Vince Ryan.
And there are one other candidate in that race. Yeah, no.
Well, we are coming up now on 8 o'clock, and for our viewers who are just joining us, we are following Super Tuesday results, of course following local races as well, and so we're going to keep updating you on the results as they come in, and we're joined by Bob Stein and Vlad Davidyuk, who are giving us their analysis on all of this, so thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah.
We're going to be here for the next couple hours. We've been showing you long lines at polling places that have closed at 7, but of course if you were in line before 7, you are still going to be allowed to vote, and a lot of people are still waiting to do that. We are getting initial results coming in for primary races. Let's go to Marcelino. You got some new stuff?
Yeah, of course we do. Let's reset the state of the race across the country on this
Okay.
Super Tuesday. Dark green are projections we've made for Joe Biden. Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, all in Biden's column. Solid wins for him that his campaign needed, based a lot on a heavy African-American turnout. Bernie Sanders has won Vermont, no big surprise there. That is his home state. No other projections we've been able to make so far. Let's come down here to Texas because the results have changed. We said here, live TV, huh? We'll go back here.
I'm impressed you're able to do this.
Yes. A lot of practice, Russ. All right, there we go. So you could see Bernie Sanders still with a 6% lead. We bumped up to 21 precincts reporting. We were at 20% just a few minutes ago. This is statewide. I have a question for you, Bob, actually, because I was coming into Harris County, and these are still early vote numbers. Yeah. But back in 2016, I think we had 71,000 early votes in the Democratic primary. We're almost on par with that.
You were on par, and that
Or a
probably
little more,
also
actually.
includes the mail-in voting now. I suspect they process the mail ballots as well. They've been going up a little bit. I'm a little bit surprised. This is a higher turnout than I would have. I mean, when I looked at the actual number of votes cast on early voting, the jurisdictions in Harris County, that number was close to 116,000.
Can we go back to Harris County just for a second? I had a quick question for Bob.
Right here.
I really wanted to see the Michael Bloomberg vote tonight in Harris County, especially. One of his national co-chairs is Mayor Turner. Big push there. He's been in Harris County several times over the last couple of months. Doing pretty well in this county considering. Did you expect this number on an early vote? What do you expect for the end of the night?
I think what happened here was Bloomberg's endorsement, the endorsement by the mayor of Bloomberg, obviously gave him a big boost, particularly in the African-American community. It was done to neutralize what was the stop and frisk criticism. But by the time that story got in, there was a debate and the non-disclosure agreements over sexual harassment. Yeah. Bloomberg was getting hit pretty hard, and he was, what do they call it in boxing? He was countering, but countering rather quickly, and mostly in the African-American community. I would have loved to have seen Bloomberg on the ballot in South Carolina, because that's when you could get a sense. I think what you're seeing here are really the consequences of early voting and the endorsement by Mayor Turner, particularly in some of the black communities. But black voters, I'm betting, didn't vote on early voting. Most of them are going to probably be election day voters. And I think they were waiting to see when South Carolina came in, when they heard about Clyburns. These are a sophisticated, informed, you're not talking about general voters. These are primary voters. Someone shows up for a primary, they're hardcore partisans. They're not undecided about who to vote for. This time they were. And I think what you're beginning to see is evidence of Biden's claim that it's anybody but Bernie. Now, Bernie had, I think, a bigger lead in some polls. I think that's beginning to shrink. But you're seeing Biden, Bloomberg, and Warren dividing up what is Bernie Sanders' vote. Warren, another progressive, would like to get some of that, but these two, if you think of these two votes, that is what the moderate wing of the party looks like. And it's beginning to look like it's a 40% vote. But the 28 and the 13, it's pretty even.
So Bloomberg is hurting Biden in Texas at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that Bloomberg's vote would have gone to Joe Biden. I would have imagined that Elizabeth Warren's vote would split, but mostly go. But most of Bloomberg's, 80%, would have gone to Biden. So the longer that Bloomberg stays in this race, the less likely Biden's going to be able to go in Milwaukee in July and get that nomination. Bernie's the only candidate, I think, at this point, unless Bloomberg and or Warren pull out, that is going to be able to win the nomination without having to go into the convention floor. The problem for Warren is she said, like Bloomberg, I'm going into Milwaukee. I want to fight on the floor. Well, she keeps probably taking more votes away from Bernie Sanders than anybody else.
If I recall, Bob, back in 2016, Hillary Clinton did a little bit better than what I'm seeing now. I know these are early votes, but Hillary Clinton had a strong showing in Fort Bend County against Bernie Sanders in that primary. This appears to be relatively tight.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hillary Clinton was a different candidate. The Fort Bend electorate was not yet emerging. It was still pretty much a black and Hispanic. I think in the 4 years, one group that's emerged, and I think it's probably a Joe Biden support, we'll see, are the South Asian vote, which could be as much as 15 to maybe 20% of the primary vote. And that was evidence in Kulkarni's successful run.
We do have some news here, guys. Polls closed in Colorado at the top of the hour, and the AP is projecting that Sanders will win the state of Colorado. Again, no vote totals. I know that might be weird for some viewers to see no numbers on the board and a projection already being made. But again, this is based on exit polls and data where the AP feels confident to know that when it's all said and done, Bernie Sanders will handedly win the state of Colorado. No big surprise there either.
No, I mean, the biggest vote, look at the places you've mentioned where the vote comes from. Fort Collins, Denver, Colorado Springs, throw in Boulder, and what do they all have in common? Huge college campuses. Yeah. And I did mention something else. Colorado doesn't vote the way we vote. No. They only vote by mail. That vote was sent out a month ago, and most of it was collected a week and a half ago. Most of the vote in Colorado was cast, counted, and will be announced almost immediately when they open up the results before the Nevada caucuses, and with a heavy college campus. I actually been out in Boulder where, you know what they do to tell people to vote? They tell the students to come down to a beer hall. They have a big TV screen like this. They show you the ballot, and they show you how to fill it out.
One thing that I
vote
think
by mail, and they fill out all the ballot.
One thing that I think is interesting, obviously the night's not over. California is the big delegate haul. Texas will be another huge delegate haul. But going into the night, Sanders was ahead by a few delegates, four delegates. But at least at this point in the race, the Biden campaign has to be feeling pretty good because they have taken the delegate lead. 168 delegates at this point that the AP has allocated to 106 from Sanders.
That's going to be critical for him to not only show legitimacy and viability going forward, but to show that he's arrested the rise of Sanders. A lot of the problem that Democrat voters have is they're worried whether or not Biden can actually push forward, whether or not Sanders can be overcome. And so Biden has to have a really strong showing tonight to be able to do that. Otherwise,
we don't expect Biden to be at the top of the delegate board at the end of the night when California votes. Is the consensus?
I think it'll be. I don't think. No, I think it'll be even. But I think what Biden has proven. Look at the names you got on that board now. With the exception of Warren, the other two, Buttigieg and Klobuchar, are gone, and they've endorsed. I think the wild card now becomes Bloomberg. And does Bloomberg take away votes from Biden? I think clearly he does. What happens in California? Does Bernie Sanders win California because of Bloomberg?
Well, a huge chunk of California's already voted too. Early
yes,
votes. Millions of voters.
Not
in
only
California.
early, but they've also have optional vote by mail.
Right.
And so, when you talk about a throwaway vote, there were people in Colorado who got their ballot a month ago. Most of them fill it out within 2 days.
Right.
Here's the crazy thing in Colorado. Everybody gets mailed a ballot, and you get free postage to mail it back. How do people return their ballots? 2/3 of them walk it in within 3 days of the election.
Yeah,
so
well,
they fill out the ballot.
Oklahoma.
They don't change it. They walk it in, causing all kinds of problems because they have to open up and count them, but they don't change it. So it's really kind of, and this of course is in Oregon and Washington, but California adopted a vote by mail optionally and vote centers. So you're getting all of this early voting. I'll give you another little wrinkle, the coronavirus. What would happen if this terrible pandemic spreads and it comes back in November when the flu season starts? How are we going to vote? Do we have any experience with dealing with this? We actually do. It's called Sandy, Hurricane Sandy, 2012, when all of the East Coast was devastated by a terrible storm. Turnout rates only dropped by less than 2% in that election because the election officials in about 11 states, none of which were prepared for this, none of which had early voting, vote by mail, vote centers. New York just adopted it. Maryland had vote by mail, but only recently. They all actually came up with a way to allow people to vote by mail, provisional, and at locations that were open like hospitals and schools.
They consolidated a lot of voting centers too. and just expanded them, made them a lot
and
bigger.
did an exceptional job. The Presidential Commission, I was a staffer on it and watched it. But I think we're going to start seeing a different way of voting, and I don't think we're going to be seeing these long lines. I think if this epidemic or pandemic gets serious, and we don't want people coming into little schoolrooms where kids have been sitting or not sitting because they've been told to be home, I think we'll find another way, and I think we'll be looking at electronic types of voting.
Well, let's hope we don't get to that point. Let's hope we don't have to worry about that in November.
That's what election officials have to worry about.
Sure.
Well, this has been very important to voters. Voters have issues that are very close to their heart. Janelle Bluto, one of our reporters, was looking into that.
Immigration and border security continue to be the most important problems facing Texas, but there are other issues top of mind for primary voters. A new University of Texas Texas Tribune poll asked Texans what they think is the most important problem facing the country. For Democrats, the top two problems are political corruption and leadership, followed by health care. You can see how that compares to Republicans in red. Republicans' top concerns continue to be immigration and border security, and it shows where these issues stand with Democrats. So how do we deal with these problems? Well, each party has its own possible solutions.
And where's Hill from? Brazoria?
Thank you. Yes, Janelle Bluto there. Let's go over to Marcelino with some new numbers.
Well, quick update, guys. We can project that Joe Biden will win the state of Oklahoma. It was close for early on in the night, but now it has been called a win for Joe Biden. That's about an 11-point win with 52% of precincts reporting. You see a whole lot of green on the map. Bloomberg spent a lot of time, millions of money here as well, millions of dollars here as well. You can see that earned him one county, and one county there, purple for Bernie. I do want to go back out to the larger map real quick. Two quick points to make. Minnesota just closed as well. This is one we'll want to watch because, as you recall, the expectation was Amy Klobuchar would win her home state. She dropped out. There was an ad running today from the Biden campaign on behalf of Amy Klobuchar telling folks to vote for Joe Biden. Again, very early, less than 1% of the expected vote in. Not a lot of votes, but Joe Biden has the lead. We'll have to watch and see what the effect of that endorsement is up there in Minnesota. And one more quick thing that just caught my eye here when we looked at the Massachusetts numbers. No projection yet. 11% of precincts reporting, so the numbers are starting to add up. And Bob, we were talking earlier, it's kind of striking that Joe Biden is in the lead in Senator Warren's home state. Again, it's early, doesn't mean he's going to win the state, but the fact that he's up, we don't know where these votes are coming from, but significant at this point.
And important to point out that, this is not like the general election where in most states it's winner take all. If you get to 15% in any of these states, you're going to get something out of it. So everybody wins something in a lot of these states tonight, the top candidates.
Yes.
The Oklahoma one is kind of interesting. Oklahoma is an oil and gas state, but it's also a big fracking state. And Bloomberg's been, along with some of the more progressive elements of the Democratic Party, strongly opposed to fracking. Fracking, of course, is very important in Texas, although the oil and gas market's not doing so well. And West Pennsylvania, another important battleground state. And so a lot of Democrats are thinking, you can't be against fracking and expect to do well in Texas, Oklahoma, or for that matter, Western Pennsylvania. And I'm kind of coming in to conclude they're all right. In fact, if you're an environmentalist, if you're concerned about the environment, one argument about fracking is it's a whole lot better than coal and petroleum, right? The World Wildlife Federation actually supports fracking and natural gas consumption as an alternative to petroleum-based products and, of course, coal. So even within that progressive element, who claim to be Democrats, I think Bloomberg's positions, of course Warren's positions, and of course Bernie Sanders. Biden has also been taking a rather strident position, but I've noticed he's been backing away and talking about ways in which we can do transitions, right, from natural gas to sustainable.
There's a difference between full endorsement of an environmentalist position and incrementalism, and getting forward in that direction. And so the moderates tend to be.
And what's funny here is that the moderates in the Democratic Party are clearly drawing a line there. I mean, there's Fletcher, who could not possibly oppose fracking. I mean, it's in the heart of her district. And I think she personally believes it's about a transition. Here's what's interesting. The Republicans are catching on. Congressman McCarthy introduced what was their global warming. Now, it was involved in planting trees, but they were recognizing that the denialer, the Gomerts, Congressman Gomer from up in North Texas, you can't just say there isn't global warming. You can say it may not be due to human activity, but there's a problem here and we got to do something about it. Congressmen from Florida know that they're losing prime real estate every time a hurricane comes in, and the Republicans now are trying to challenge. My sense is they're challenging mainly because younger voters are leaving them.
Well, they're
in
embracing
droves.
the values, they're embracing those issues. They're doing the same thing on healthcare, they're doing the same thing on
and coming up with
social
market-oriented
issues,
solutions.
Absolutely.
Cap and trade's another good one for that.
So for the folks who are watching us online, some people saying that there are still long lines in Sugar Land. Someone saying that Sutton Elementary has a long line as well. So people still waiting to vote, even though they got in line before that 7 o'clock deadline, still waiting in that line to cast their ballot. Adam Bennett has more on these lines. Adam, where are you reporting from, Adam?
Yeah, so guys, we're here at the Harris County Central Count, and of course, as we saw, long lines at most of these polling stations. At last check, only 28 were closed out of 802. So they can't turn in the results until all of those people that are in line are able to to cast their ballot rather. So we're still waiting on these results to come in. We're supposed to see the first ones any minute. A bit more about the lines though. They are sending more machines to some of these areas, some of these polling sites that do have a lot of long lines. Of course, TSU earlier, they sent 14. We're told they also sent 12 to HCC Southeast. We're told there were 350 people in line as of about 20 minutes or so. In total, they've sent 62, I'm told, all to Democratic sites. Now, a bit more about this. The county clerk was telling me that she had wanted to do a joint primary where the voters could use any available machine at any of these polling sites. She says both the Republican and Democratic parties said no, so they ended up giving an equal number of machines to each of the parties at each of these sites. Now, they determined how many machines go to each site, I'm told, based on past experience, past voting history there. So these sites, each party could get anywhere between 8 machines to 24 machines. So a site like West Gray, where we saw Jason Miles earlier, the Metropolitan Multi-Service Center, that's going to get the most. That is going to get 24. But so far tonight, as they've been getting requests from these election judges to send more machines their way, they have been sending them, and we got word that the 14 that they sent to TSU just arrived a short time ago. But in all, there are 802 polling sites, 401 centers, and then 2 parties at each one, and most of them are still open at this point. Now, as they do close, we're going to be getting those cards. They're going to go to 4 drop-off locations. Then they're going to be brought here, where I'm told they should be uploaded within a matter of seconds once they get put into the machines here. They do have more machines. It's an instant transmission. It's not remote. So once they actually do get here, the results should be quick to come in. But of course, we just have to get everybody that's in line to vote first. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Adam, thank you so much.
Well, let's take it up to Austin right now. John Cornyn, that's where he is, and he's at the podium. Let's listen in.
To the courthouse. And that, of course, starts with the election of Donald J. Trump as the next president of the United States. We are making our choice tonight, and we choose Texas. And we're going to keep fighting for her. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Let's keep up this momentum, and let's win in November. Yay. May God continue to bless all of you, and may God continue to bless the great state of Texas and the United States of America.
And that is Senator John Cornyn there, seeking a 4th term in November. He is winning his primary easily, but a lot of people think he'll be in for the fight of his life, or the toughest fight, at least, of his political career come November against one of his Democratic challengers.
Absolutely. So stay with us. We're going to continue our coverage. We're going to take a quick break right now, but we'll be back with our political analysts in just a few minutes. And of course, we're running live results, as you can see on the screen. Hi, everyone. We are approaching 8:30 right now. I am Reka Mutteraj with Russ Lewis on this Super Tuesday, and we have initial results coming in right now. We've got a lot going on. We want you to be a part of it, so a couple things here. If you would like to get results right to your phone, we're asking folks to text us. That phone number is 713-526-1111. Text the word results, and we will get this information right to your phone. We're also following all of this, obviously, on Facebook Live. That's probably how you're watching us, and of course on YouTube. So we want to see your questions. Keep them coming in because a lot of people have questions on this election night.
We have our political analyst here. We'll bring them in just a minute, but we're also answering your questions. We're going over as many races as we can, trying to focus as much as we can tonight on Texas races and our local county races as well. There are so many of them here in this primary for both parties tonight. So we're watching those results coming in, and we're keeping an eye on those for you. So let us know if there's a race you're interested in that we're not talking about. We'll get to that. We definitely want to hear from you. And then we have Marcelino Benito. He is over at the big board as well, and he's been watching the national results as well, also breaking down the Texas counties and the race for president.
Yeah, but before we get to him, we actually want to get back out to Jason Miles.
Yes.
We've been checking in with him. He has been at the polling station on West Gray Road, basically long lines there after the polls closed at 7 o'clock. So let's go live to him. Jason.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, there is relief in sight. Take a look behind me. The end of the line has progressed considerably since we last checked in with you. You can see these folks are approaching the door to the West Gray Multi-Service Center, and part of the reason it may be moving along a little faster than it had been is because the county clerk has apparently, and according to my colleague Adam Bennett over at the election headquarters, they've sent in some additional voting machines to this location and some other very busy locations that still had lines well after 7 o'clock tonight. You see one of the campaigns bringing out pizza. Others have been passing out crackers and water to the voters, not necessarily asking them for their votes, but just being nice. One guy who got here just around 7 o'clock and is near the end of the line said this makes the Voodoo Donuts opening line, puts it to shame. If you remember over on Washington Avenue a couple of weeks ago when Voodoo Donuts opened up to much fanfare, there was a very long line out the door. They say this was much longer, but they're willing to wait. And that's the thing I've noticed. A lot of these people aren't bitter. They're not mad. They're not complaining. They're not going away in a huff. They're more than happy to exercise their right to vote and wait in line, apparently, as long as it may take. And at last check, according to some poll workers here, they were thinking it was going to take about an hour, hour and a half longer for the people who are at the end of the line. I'm thinking it may not be that long. It is now, what, a little after 8 o'clock? I think these people will probably be in and out by 9:15-ish. We'll have to wait and see, but it's certainly been a long day here at this polling site and many others. I just got an interview, a quick interview with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who has been out campaigning at these polling sites. She is up, of course, every 2 years, this being one of those years. She said a polling site on the northeast side, people were even still in their cars waiting to get into the lot in order to park and then get out and get in line and vote. So that's kind of the story we've seen all over Harris County today, guys.
Well, patience is key. A lot of people waiting till the day of to vote this year. Jason Miles, thanks. We'll check back with you as we watch those last folks get in the door. Very orderly out there. It was nice to see, right? Just people waiting their turn.
Yeah, he said people were happy to be there, bringing out snacks and stuff for folks who've been, waiting for another
I think
hour
pizza's in order if you've been out there long enough, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, the weather's nice. We're giving you some results here from the presidential race as we look, and you can see just about 6% voting turnout right now, votes counted. So you see Bernie Sanders with 29%, Biden with 23%, Michael Bloomberg 19. That is a statewide number. The first numbers are starting to come into Harris County as well.
Yes.
We saw those get carted in a few minutes ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Janelle Bluda is actually with the Harris County Democratic Party. Janelle?
Hey guys, hi, can you hear me? We are at the Democratic Watch Party, the official Democratic Watch Party here at Chapman and Kirby. It's been going since about 7 o'clock. It's starting to pick up, lots of excitement here tonight, especially because this is such a big day for the Democratic Party. I'm joined here now by Lily Schechter. She's the chair of the Democratic Party. Now, Lily, tell me a little bit about how you guys are feeling tonight.
We are really excited. We had record voting today, which was super exciting in Harris County and statewide.
And we are thrilled that we actually only have the early vote returns in. We don't have any election day returns in because people are still voting in Harris County. So as Democrats, we are thrilled that we've had record turnout today.
I was going to say, people are still waiting in line right now. What is it? What is it about waiting till today that you think is bringing people out?
I think that as people have been watching the presidential election, we had some big changes in the national elections this last weekend. And I think there are a lot of people who are waiting to see what was going to happen. Who's the candidate that's going to come out of South Carolina? Who's the candidate they really want to support? This last weekend moved a bunch of people to come out to vote on Tuesday that I really were sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out who is the best person to beat Trump.
And it's interesting being at this party because people here have voted for different people, but they're all on the same team. So talk a little bit about, the reason for you guys wanting to be together tonight to watch this.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, everyone in this room that came to this election party is a Democrat, and we share core values. We may disagree on who the right candidate is, but even at the presidential level, if you look at all the different candidates, they all agree on 95% of the issues. As Democrats, we all realize that the big fight is not amongst Democrats. The big fight is in November against Republicans. So this is one of the first things we do in order to bring all the Democrats together to really get engaged and involved and spend some time with each other, socializing, watching the results, because November is our big fight.
Because we were talking about it earlier, this is just one small race and a very big one. So tell me, what have you guys done leading up to today, and then what happens after this?
Absolutely. So the Democratic Party in Harris County actually conducts the primary. So we've been making sure that all of our locations are open and that we have election judges in every single location. We have 400 locations in Harris County, so we've been staffing those locations. And really, while we're doing that in the office, we're also running a Get Out the Vote campaign. We've called over 100,000 Democrats. We've sent out vote-by-mail applications to over 100,000 Democrats in Harris County and have sent over 100,000 texts in Harris County to make sure that Democrats know that they do have choices in the primary to get them out to vote. So that's what we've been doing leading up to the primary. After the primary, our focus is to really engage volunteers all over the county to make sure that in November, every single Democrat in Harris County comes out to vote up and down the ballot for every single position on the ballot. We don't want Democrats just looking at the presidential race. We want Democrats looking at every single race to make sure that they vote for the judges, to the constables, to school board, to Congress, to state rep, to the White House, and voting on every single one of those, because we need to beat Trump in November, but that's the first priority, right? The second priority is we need to win at every level of government in Texas so that we can show Republicans how we want the state to look.
So you haven't slept. What you're telling me is you haven't slept and you're not sleeping going forward. What is your final message to any Democratic voters out there, not only about today, but going forward?
It is incredibly important for everyone to remember that every vote matters. Every time you don't vote, you cede your power to someone else. So we want all Democrats to remember that it's incredibly important to not only vote, to get your neighbors to vote, to get everyone to vote, and that the only way we win in November from the White House to the State House is if every Democrat comes out and votes for all the Democrats on the ballot. And our big message is together we win.
Perfect. Thank you so much for talking to us. And Russ and Rego, we're going to stick around here at the watch party, watch those results come in. Maybe we'll check back in with you guys in just a bit.
All right, Janelle, thank you so much. And you heard her there, every vote counts, and that certainly makes sense, especially when we go to Marcelino now and you're taking a look at the board. Some interesting results coming through.
Yeah, let's just reset the Super Tuesday map right now. Several projections we've already made pretty early on in the night. Joe Biden has won Virginia, he's won North Carolina, he's won Alabama, he's won Oklahoma. We projected that before the break. Since we last saw you, he has been projected to win Tennessee. Joe Biden has won the state of Tennessee. You can see he's winning here by about 13 percentage points with 64% of precincts reporting, but again, the AP calling that race for Joe Biden. No surprise there. He's pretty much been carrying the South all night long. There are a couple surprises that we should be talking about, but we do want to mention that Bernie Sanders has also been projected to win 2 states so far. He is leading in Texas. We'll get to that in just a little bit, but obviously he won his home state of Vermont up here in the Northeast. He's also been projected to win Colorado. That projection came in minutes after polls closed. Now, the surprises on the map that I think are catching catching a lot of people by surprise right now. And again, it is early. We do want to warn folks that it is early, but not that early. 27% of precincts reporting in Massachusetts, and Joe Biden has a 5 percentage point lead up on Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. That's Elizabeth Warren's home state. If she doesn't win this, there's going to be conversations about whether she should even continue in this race. She is viable. She will get delegates at this point, but we'll have to see how this race shakes up. The Biden campaign has to be feeling good about Massachusetts at this point. Go back here to the map. And the other surprise that I think we'll have to watch very closely on the national map is Minnesota. We talked about it before the break. Again, it's early, just 20% of precincts reporting, but Joe Biden has a 4 percentage point lead here in Minnesota. This is a state where his I guess a woman on his team now, Senator Klobuchar, has endorsed him. She was expected to carry this state. She backed out. She endorsed him, and he is leading right now by 4 percentage points. So that is something to watch. Now, if we come back here to Texas, let's see how things are going here in the primary race. It's shaded light purple because Bernie Sanders is ahead. Wait for those results to come up. Here we go. Bernie Sanders with 6% of precincts reporting, up by a little less than 6 percentage points. A lot of the early vote we haven't counted any of today's vote, and we were talking to Bob about that earlier. I don't know if Bob can come in here. Come on in here. And you were telling me earlier, we have to wait and see. It's going to be a while till we know what happens in Texas.
We're being told that in Harris County the polls won't close to 9:30. There's every reason to suspect at this point. We don't know where these voters are coming from in terms of where they live, if there are Democrats on the progressive or on the moderate side. But my money would be that 5.5 points won't hold up. I don't think that Biden will win Harris County. I don't think he'll win even Texas. But I think what's going to happen here is that Election Day vote is going to be a larger share of the vote than early vote, and it'll be decidedly for Biden. And I think what you're beginning to see is the Biden vote is coming out because of what happened in South Carolina, because of Klobuchar and Buttigieg's departure and endorsement, and Beto's endorsement. I'm kind of surprised that if you went to Travis County, of course, home of UT, Biden's like in 4th place. But I'd like to see what happened on Election Day. I think what you're beginning to see, look at the 2 votes.
Biden Travis County right here.
Travis, yeah. I mean, Biden's he's in a respectable 3rd, but not at the cutoff. So in that congressional district, and there are many there, it's dogged, it's cut like a pie, you don't know who's going to be getting what kinds of seats, delegates, because of where that vote has to be. But what's interesting is Election Day. I think that a lot of Democrats came to the opinion that Biden was a candidate they thought could take on the president. They were convinced of what happened in South Carolina, and I think the rest of the country is showing that. Now, the big one will be California. And as, of course, Russ has pointed out, lots of people in California, all of the people in Colorado, voted well before the Nevada caucuses. This is, the concern, of a wasted vote or a vote without information.
Bob, I got to interrupt you there. Let's go to Troy Nehls, the congressional candidate, outgoing sheriff of Fort Bend County. He's speaking now.
And I hope I haven't let you down as serving as your sheriff. Many people said, well, Sheriff, you've done a great job. You're not running for a 3rd term. Who's going to replace you? My twin brother, Trevor. I talked to him a few minutes ago and I said, Trevor, you're at 83%. Give any credit to the campaign manager, right? No, but I want to say this to all of the people for the last 90 days that have worked tirelessly to support our campaign. Those of you that are out here tonight wearing our t-shirts, those of you that have been block walking, those that have held coffees. We had numerous coffees throughout the entire district. Del Webb, Pecan Grove, the volunteers that were at the polling places during early vote for 100 hours, standing on their feet saying, please support Troy Nehls for Congress. He would be honored to represent you in Washington. You did this for me. I didn't do it on my own. You did this for me, and I want to thank you so very much for that. You did this for me. We spent many nights in this beautiful, it's called Freedom Hall. And Freedom Hall is really going to get exciting come November. Freedom Hall is going to get exciting come in November. And the number of people that came in here and were addressing envelopes and just reaching out and showing support and inspiring me and saying, Troy, you're doing a great job. You're running a very clean campaign. Keep it up. Keep it up. And we've done that. And the polls closed tonight. And I want to thank the voters of Fort Bend County, Brazoria, and Harris County. We are at 43% of the total vote. And so we've got a couple hours yet. You know, the polls are going to come through for the votes today, and I just hope we can even increase that more. But I just want to tell you, the first leg of the race is over, right? And now there's going to be a runoff. A runoff with who? Quite honestly, it doesn't matter to me.
All right, that's Troy Nehls, the current sheriff of Fort Bend County, trying to become the next congressional representative from District 22, which is Fort Bend, Brazoria, and some of Harris County as well. And right now, looking good. I want to bring you in, Vlad Davidya, from a Republican strategist. These numbers here, I know it's early. Does he look like he's going to make the runoff?
Oh, it looks almost certain that Troy Nehls is going to be one of the candidates in the race. That strength that he's been able to show very early on with these votes really indicates that his groundwork, that his campaign, his recognition with the population there is very deeply rooted, and he was able to capitalize on that. The question is, how much does he hold the other candidates down, and where are those votes coming from?
Can we bring the graphic back up here? I don't know if we can on the spot, but with all the leading Republicans there, to just see who we're talking about. Okay, here we are. So, which of the other three here? Who's the second person who makes the runoff? I'm putting you on the spot.
It's going to be very tight because, I mean, you look at those numbers. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room there, and so it really depends on who can capitalize on some of those late decision makers, the people who went to election day and maybe made up their mind today. That's gonna actually.
And then we don't have a lot of the vote in. I mean, and
right.
I think as Vlad said, the distribution across 3 counties. A guy like Greg Hill is from Brazoria, so is that 14% what he's getting out of Brazoria? Is there anything coming there in the 19, almost 20,000 votes that Troy Nehls has got? I think it's early, but I think when you have that kind of lead at the early vote, you know one person's in that runoff, and that's going to be the former sheriff. The early question is, I would have put the money on Pierce Bush, but again, you've got 2 people who don't have strong roots in the community, and Vlad said something before. You're a county sheriff. I mean, you know people, and you've been around a lot. You could say the same thing about Greg Hill, who's at least in Brazoria. But the question becomes, where is Kathleen Wall's and where is Pierce Bush's base? I don't know how many voters showed up on Election Day. This is a Republican primary. There was nothing really to attract them at the top. These were all local races. I don't think people had a lot of uncertainty about who they're going to vote for, like what we see in Harris County with the Democratic presidential primary. So I just think this is a case of we got to wait and see if 11,000 votes out of what I assume will be close to 180, maybe 200,000 votes cast.
Yeah.
Well, I saw a lot of TV commercials for the middle 2 people right there.
Oh, yeah.
For Kathleen Wall and Pierce Bush, both very well funded. Of those 3 left, Vlad, who ran the best campaign in your opinion?
I would have to say of the 3, I would say Pierce Bush was the one who was most active on the ground, the one who was connecting with the groups across town, the ones who was engaging with the people who have the ability to get people out to the polls. That said, Kathleen Wall has very deep connections with the Republican activists, with people that she's helped get into office because she's a donor who's helped a lot of candidates get across that threshold. So in terms of actually engaging on the ground, Pierce has a little bit of an edge, but Kathleen has a longer history there.
You know, a lot of people have been talking about Pierce Bush, and they know that the name obviously is there, the name recognition and the family history, that dynasty, but saying that he's a little young and that he's starting his political career on the young side. How will this fare for him in the end? I mean, obviously Nehls is out in front now. We won't know the final results for a while, but could a loss hurt him?
Well, in this particular kind of case, in politics, failing to win kind of almost is a seal of approval on your resume because it shows that you were able to compete. It shows you were able to do something, depending on how well he finishes. His family has a long history of public service. His grandfather was president. His uncle was president. His cousin is statewide elected office in Texas. So he has the ability to really leverage that name recognition, to leverage those connections, and build up on that, depending on what happens tonight. That said, that window is open for him now, and it depends on how he capitalizes on it and where it goes from there. So.
Keep in mind, Kathleen Wall ran 2 years ago, of course, in the race that eventually Congressman Crenshaw won. And if I remember, it was State Representative Roberts who was in that runoff. Wall was spending, I think, maybe 2 to 1 on both Crenshaw and Roberts, and still she couldn't make it into the runoff. So it may be that being a supporter of candidates doesn't necessarily give you an entree into being a candidate, and I think losing twice makes it, I mean, and particularly when you move from one district to another district, one community to another. It's not like Nels has moved around a lot. Maybe there are 3 counties. Pierce Bush is the same problem. I mean, finding a district to run in and then having to move there is not uncommon, and people do it on both sides of the party. But
and there's no requirement, by the way, that you live in your district even.
But
I know what you mean, though.
I think when you're running a campaign, you'd rather have a candidate like that, you know, that knows people. Not that he knows people who can introduce you to people. When I think, I never thought Detroit Nels would do as well. I thought he was a little bit too controversial. I thought the party was looking for someone a little bit more centrist. And when I saw Kathleen Wall, I said, maybe I'm wrong about that. Then when Pierce Bush got in, I was more convinced that the party would like to see somebody who's a little bit more moderate. And I don't think Pierce Bush has backed off in his support of President Trump. And I think clearly, as Vladimir said, this is still, it's a Republican primary. It's not the general electorate in the district. It's a Republican primary. And it's pretty clear, like some Democratic partisans in places like Travis County, these are people who've taken a more extreme position on the right. And I think my personal view is there may not be enough room for a Pierce Bush here, even if he goes out and says the right things about the wall, about immigration, about health care. He's not talking to what I will call a moderate Republican, and for that matter, a crossover Democrat. And I think what you're going to probably see here is a fight between probably Roy Nels and, again, I'm going to guess, my guess is that Brazoria County will come through for someone like Greg Hill. That's my money. I don't see those two as, they're basically people who are probably taking votes away from each other.
Wow. Interesting. Let's go to Jason Miles real quick, if we don't mind, guys. Just check in with him. He's been hanging out at the West Gray Service Center where there have been long lines, but we're hopefully, Jason, near the end here.
Yeah, the last guy in line here at West Gray is named Damien, and he is right over there, kind of between those columns. You can't really see him now, but a poll worker gave him a red placard. You may recall seeing that earlier, signifying that he is the last person allowed to vote because he was the last in line at the 7 o'clock cutoff. Obviously, once you were in line at 7, you still get the opportunity to vote. And at this polling location and many others, I've been keeping track of a friend, by the way, who's down at Texas Southern University, casting his ballot. He got in line at 6:20, now finally getting in the door at, what, 8:40? I think I last checked in with him at 8:40-ish, so it took him more than 2 hours from the time he got in line to the time he got into the actual polling site. The wait has been similar here, but at multiple locations, the Harris County Clerk has dispatched additional voting machines. And there are many reasons, or one primary reason, as to how polling sites got machines and the number of machines and why certain parties didn't have more machines than others, even though, say, the Democratic primary attracted a lot more people, certainly in the case here at West Gray. The parties couldn't come to an agreement, apparently, and that's according to the Harris County Clerk and others, about each party having different numbers of machines. In any event, the clerk's office and individual workers at these polling sites are trying their best to process these people. Obviously, from voter to voter, it may take more time than others to actually cast your ballot. I was in and out in about 15 minutes, I think. But some people take a lot more time. Others, depend on those sample ballots that you can fill out on your own and take in with you. That way you can kind of go through the process pretty quickly. As for the people out here, they're taking it in stride. I haven't heard many complaints. Some of the campaigns and others have been passing out snacks. Someone brought pizza a little earlier, so it's a long night, a tedious night perhaps for a lot of people here, but something they're willing to deal with, guys.
Well, we're glad they're getting through them, and everyone's been patient there, but almost 2 hours after the polls were supposed to close, finally the last folks are getting in the building there, so that's good news.
Yeah, this is very important to them. Okay, let's go back to Marcelino with some new results.
The board is changing rapidly, guys, and the Biden campaign has to be feeling real good about what they're seeing. 2 more projections for the Biden campaign. We'll start with Arkansas, if the board would cooperate. And of course, it does not, so bear with me here. We'll reset it. And try to go back in here to Arkansas. And here we go. Joe Biden is projected to win the state. 16% of precincts reporting. That's about 37% of the vote out there. And he's with a pretty sizable lead, 11 percentage points. It just changed on me, 8 percentage points. But nonetheless, the race has been called for Joe Biden in Arkansas.
The 3 candidates that are going to get delegates, right?
Yes, yes, and we're keeping an eye on that 15% threshold. So there will be candidates that get delegates other than Joe Biden. Now, the big surprise, we talked about it several times already tonight, is Minnesota, the state of Minnesota. No one, I don't think 3-4 days ago, expected Joe Biden to be competitive or be winning this state. When Amy Klobuchar dropped out, endorsed him, everything changed. Joe Biden is projected to win the state of Minnesota right now with 44%, almost half of the vote out there in already. He has a 5 percentage point lead, so that's a big haul for the Biden campaign. Of course, the Sanders campaign still has a lot to feel good about. They're leading in Texas. We're going to have to wait and see what happens there. They won in Colorado, they won in Vermont, and they're leading in Maine. And all eyes on the Sanders campaign is on California, because that's where they think they're going to really bring in most of their delegates tonight.
400 plus delegates up for grabs.
That's the
big
one
prize.
you want to win.
Yes.
Yep. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you so much, Marcelino.
We want to get right now a race we haven't looked at too much here, and this is for the U.S. Senate. This is John Cornyn's seat. We'll look at the Democrats vying to challenge him in November. A lot of candidates here, so you're probably looking at a runoff. We'll see at this point, but MJ Hager is the one that everyone's been watching. She has the money, the advertising, and right now with 31% of that vote.
Yeah, she's a former Air Force pilot, a teacher, a businesswoman. You've probably seen her commercials on our air as well, so of course she's leading right now. Cristina Ramirez there, a favorite of the Sanders base, a longtime workers' rights advocate. She launched a nonprofit that champions Latino voters, so she is trailing behind. But we were talking about some other folks in this race as well. Senator Royce West, a longtime state senator, Dallas Democrat. Annie Mama Garcia, a former student. Bob Stein is here, yes.
Chris Bell as well.
And Chris Bell as well.
You'll know him from he was a one-term House member. Let me ask you guys both this. Are you surprised that Cristina Ramirez here is polling better or doing better than a longtime state senator from Dallas? She may be in the runoff here with MJ Hager.
I think she will be, and I think it's because he's a state senator from Dallas.
Yeah.
And Amanda Edwards is a city councilwoman or ex-councilwoman, as is Chris Bell and, of course, congressman. When you're from a region, you may pick up the vote in Dallas, you may pick it up in Harris, although Harris, you can see Chris and Amanda are equal. They're just tearing each other. They're dividing up their vote here. Royce West, Dallas, but what Ramirez has is the Bernie vote. That's what I'm sure her vote tracks really well with people and Travis and Bear.
The last poll I saw, she's doing about double what the last poll had.
Yeah, well, I think the U of H poll was 50% couldn't even name a candidate.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk to people on the phone about candidates, as opposed to people who come out of the voting booth, it's a very different type of dynamic. And that's assuming you're actually talking to people who intend to vote, which is a tricky one. I think the polling is usually good on that. It's just people aren't focusing on what amount to be 15 names. I'll tell you, there's a controversy in this race that's going to pop up. In some of the counties in the valley, Hidalgo, Zapata, Edinburgh, the voting machines could not accommodate on one screen all the names of the candidates.
Too many of them.
There were too many. Now, they're randomly assigned within county. So in every county, the lists will be different. You might be in first, you may be in last, you may be in the middle. But candidates who were on the second screen, voters didn't get a prompt to tell them, go to second screen to see all the candidates.
There's more people there, yeah.
I'm no lawyer. I don't know if Vlad is or any of you, but my guess is that someone might challenge that simply because they were disenfranchised from having a chance to vote. I'm not certain that it's, in the big picture, it's going to matter. I find it very hard to believe that John Cornyn will lose this race to Hager, Ramirez, or Annie Mama. But
I don't know what the other numbers are. I don't know if the third place person in this race is close to Cristina Ramirez.
I was looking at the statewide numbers, and they're about, what's her name, Amanda Edwards and Chris Bell. We're both in double digits, but 4 to 5 points. So, again, it's a case of, here's a woman that was running with the Bernie label and the Bernie endorsement, and if Bernie does well in Texas and wins it, I would expect it would be Hager. And Hager, I think, just on name ID alone.
She's been running a very strong campaign, very high recognition there.
Well, and she may appeal to some Republican voters being a veteran. She was shot down in a helicopter in Afghanistan. I mean, she's got some things that people, a story people like to hear. But here's my question for you about this race. A lot of people say John Cornyn, going for his 4th term here, is going to be the toughest one yet going in. Do you agree with that? His base has always been kind of squishy. I mean, I'm putting it,
And it should be. It should be tough because the fact is that Texas has changed in the last 4 years, in the last 6 years since Cornyn last ran. It's a completely different playing field. The entire race, the people who are coming out are completely different from what he faced last time.
Well, he saw what happened to Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke and that race being so close, so it sounds like he wanted to kind of shore up those endorsements early and make sure he was solid going into this.
Well, the thing is that, and here's the thing, when Cornyn last ran in 2014, it was a wave election there that brought a lot of Republicans back into dominating Senate, and so he was able to take advantage of that. Now Cornyn has to confront the 2 waves of not only the Beto wave, but the anti-Trump wave. And so Cornyn has a double task of not only trying to nail down his base, but try to convince people who would otherwise oppose him to go ahead and give him one last look and give him one last shot.
Is he in trouble?
No, I don't think so. No, not statewide.
The problem with John Cornyn may be also that his own base, he's never been a favorite of what I call the Tea Party, or even for that matter, the more conservative element of the Republican Party. He's risen in stature because he's the number 2 person in the Senate, and that's worth a lot, particularly to Texas. But I can't imagine, I mean, you don't beat a candidate without an opponent. Now, I think let's say something else. If the president runs into trouble, if it's a Biden or a Bloomberg, but not a Bernie Sanders, then there may be a chance for someone to break through. I just don't think any of these, I mean, I can go through the 15 names. These are not candidates that are going to beat John Cornyn. No. The only way John Cornyn gets beaten, I think at this point, is if the top of the ticket falls down. If the president utterly fails. Ted Cruz was an exception because Ted Cruz wasn't well liked even within the Republican Party. I'd say half of that margin that he wins by, what, 2.5 points, he should have won by 7 or 8. That would have been half of what Governor Abbott won by 15 over Lupe Valdez. So the real question here is who can beat Cornyn? The only one who can beat Cornyn is probably Donald Trump. I don't think John Cornyn is going to make any mistakes. And the other thing, we don't have straight ticket voting anymore.
That's true.
And the crazy thing here is that it's the Republicans that have been splitting their tickets since 2010 at a much higher rate than Democrats. So one wonders whether or not you've taken away. I actually don't think the button makes much of a difference. The Republicans thought so, but the button doesn't make you vote straight ticket. You make yourself vote straight ticket. The button may make it easier, and if you think so little of a Democratic voter that they don't know how to vote straight ticket, but I think for the Republicans that's a problem. Their members are much more likely to split their ticket, starting at the president all the way down, and I think for John Cornyn that may be the only problem. If Donald Trump runs well in Texas, he wins by 12 points. But my prediction is he'll win by less than half than that, 5 to 6. He'll win. But the real question is there enough defection? I actually think John Cornyn will run better than the president. I think John Cornyn could run by 10 or 12 over any of these candidates.
I think that's very likely.
And the president wins by 6. And I think it's not because anybody's voting for any Democrat among the Republicans. They just skipped the presidency. They're confident that the state will go Republican, and John Cornyn is their preferred top of the ticket.
They'll go do the undervote and they'll move on from there.
Exactly.
Interesting. Just after 9 o'clock, if you're watching us on our digital platforms, we appreciate it. Here on KHOU, I'm with you for a couple hours here, going over all the local races, the national races, and answering your questions on Facebook and our website as well. So get those to us because we're watching those scroll along as well.
Yeah, and right now we want to get to Marcelino Benito again and some new information regarding Bloomberg.
Yeah, we've been watching the board all night, and what you notice is you don't see any Orange. Orange is Michael Bloomberg's color. He has not won a single state tonight. He won American Samoa, I think 6 delegates. Not what he wanted to do tonight after spending almost $500 million of his own money. We are getting news, a word from the AP. The AP is reporting they've spoken to a Bloomberg spokesman who is saying the campaign is planning to reassess tomorrow the future of his campaign as a result of this poor performance today, I guess is a fair way to put it for the campaign. So they will be reassessing after a strong showing by the Biden campaign so far. So let's reset the national board as we know it on this Super Tuesday. Everything that is dark green belongs to Joe Biden. Those are projections for his campaign. We're talking Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Minnesota. Minnesota, a pretty big surprise. You also see some light green on the board. That means Joe Biden is leading in these 2 northeastern states. That is the state of Massachusetts. If you recall, that is Elizabeth Warren's home state. Let's go back in here. This is Elizabeth Warren's home state. Her color is yellow. You don't see any yellow on the board. She's not winning or leading in a single county at this point. We're 34% precincts reporting. That's about 31% of the expected vote in Massachusetts. I would argue that is a pretty stunning surprise, at least at this point in the race. Biden holding a 7% lead. She is viable, though. Russ has mentioned this all night. That's something we have to watch.
We have to watch right now Bernie Sanders, who is speaking.
Let's go to Bernie.
Thank you, Vermont. You know, it's a funny thing. 31 years ago today, we won the mayoral race in Burlington, Vermont. And we won that race against all of the odds. Everybody said it couldn't be done. And when we began this race for the presidency, everybody said it couldn't be done. But tonight, I tell you with absolute confidence, we are going to win the Democratic nomination. And we are going to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of this country. We are going to win. We are going to defeat Trump because we are putting together an unprecedented grassroots, multi-generational, multiracial movement. It is a movement which speaks to the working families of this country who are sick and tired of working longer hours for low wages and seeing all new income and wealth going to the top 1%. It is a movement which says the United States will have health care for all as a human right. It is a movement that says we will bring major reforms in education, making sure that all of our kids can go to college without coming out in debt. Now, what makes this movement unique is we are taking on the corporate establishment. We are taking on the greed of Wall Street, the greed of the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world. the greed of the insurance companies, and given the existential crisis of climate change, we are saying to the fossil fuel industry, their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our country and the world.
All right, they are feeling the burn tonight in Vermont. Bernie Sanders there. He got to get back to the home state and vote today. So then he's holding a rally there. Having a pretty good night. California's not come in yet. It's going to get a lot better for him once that happens. But we just heard about Bloomberg here. I wanted to bring you guys in on this. They're going to reassess after what's happened tonight, and whenever I hear that, I think he's getting out. Is that right, do you think?
Well, I don't know, but I know that there were rumors, more than rumors, that the Biden and the Bloomberg camps were talking. One would hope that if you're Joe Biden, that Mr. Bloomberg will get out, endorse Biden, and then put another $500 million into the campaign. I mean, even if none of that happens, the fact that he's reassessing, and clearly the board shows it, there's really no way. I think Bloomberg said today the only way he thought he could win the nomination, like Miss Warren, would be to do it on the floor of the convention, and that's not sustainable. Although Bloomberg can finance that, it's just not politically sustainable. This is a complete turnaround for someone like Joe Biden. We were talking about his demise after Nevada. Forget about Nevada. Even, of course, New Hampshire and Iowa. And for the vice president, it sort of reminds me of John McCain. If you remember, when John McCain was on a bus, he was down on fumes. He wasn't, I mean, the campaign was over, and then the next thing we know, and the truth of the matter is, and he could have won that election if it were not for the stock market, but we can talk about that later. Now, the Bloomberg possible departure is important for two reasons. One, he's the biggest opponent. He takes votes away from Biden, but he has money, and he has said that he's committed to spending his money to defeat Donald Trump. I don't know Bloomberg's personality on this, but I heard him talk rather eloquently about the coronavirus, and I think he generally thinks this is where the president is dangerous to the country, whether it is or not, and whether it's politics. In Bloomberg's mind, that's all that matters. He writes the checks. He shaves his biggest donor's face every morning, and because he does that, he listens to it.
Do you think that he is going to throw his support behind Biden no matter what, then?
I don't see how he can't. He could say neutral. I don't think he's going to support Bernie.
He said he wasn't going to stay neutral. He said he's going to get behind. Oh, you mean until it's decided?
I think if he's either going to not support anybody in the Democratic primary and continue to run his ads and attack the president. That's not the ideal outcome for Biden, but I don't see him supporting Bernie, and I don't see him supporting Warren. And I think, Vlad and I were just saying before the break, I don't see how Warren now losing her own state. I thought Bernie was going to win. That was, I mean, this shows you how the dynamics of what happened in a 20, 40, 72-hour period changes where the Democratic Party is. It tells you something else about the American electorate.
Well, let me tell you why I don't think Bloomberg is going to support Sanders. Okay, I interviewed him on Thursday. I know. But my question to him was, the last question was, you're one of the most successful businessmen on the planet. How is a socialist doing so well in this race? And he looked at the camera and he said, "Oh, you mean the millionaire socialist with 3 houses? Him?" And then he went off on him. I mean, clearly they're the
at his heart, he's a capitalist.
They're oil and water,
At his heart, he's a capitalist. He's opposed to Bernie's entire raise and debt trade. He's opposed to his worldview, period. Now, going back to what we were saying earlier, if Bloomberg wants to have a say in the Democratic primary going forward, in the race coming forward from here to November, he's going to have to, at some point, throw his money, throw his weight behind Biden, because otherwise, he's making things harder. If he wants to actually have a role, if he wants to actually have something to say in the conversation, he wants to grease the wheels, he's going to have to push in behind Biden.
And I think you're right. And yet, look at a guy like Bloomberg. He ran this campaign, and it looked like it was going nowhere.
Right.
Absolutely nowhere. He wasn't on the ballot until today, and it still looks like it's not going anywhere. Yet, I will argue that when the history is written about this election, he's probably the most influential player. And not because of just his money, but what he has done with this money. He has been, I think, exquisite in turning out voters, defining what is, for the Democrats, the key weaknesses of the president, and pulling them together. And the real question is, does he need to be part of the Biden team, or does he do this like he's been doing it for the last, 4 to 6 months on his own? I mean, it's very clear that Bloomberg's advertising against Trump, even during the impeachment, has brought him down, particularly with key constituencies and battleground states. You can see it in the polling. The question becomes, how does he fit into the Biden campaign? I myself do not see the Biden campaign as a well-oiled, well-thought-out activity. Even his supporters, Mr. Clyburn from South Carolina, openly criticized the president, the vice president. This is a joke. I don't think Joe Biden is any better a candidate than he was in the 80s. Nevertheless, he will be the standard bearer, I think. I think he's going to get the nomination. I think he actually is going to beat out Bernie. And if he does, I think, you know, for moderates, that's a victory. But it doesn't make him any better a candidate. He's going to need something else. I think melding the Bloomberg money and I think organization makes Biden a better candidate.
Well, that organization led to really reactionary political ads. I mean, someone would talk about something, and the next week you would see a political ad with Bloomberg addressing that exact issue from the NDAs, from all these other issues that have come up. It was very reactionary, and they moved very, very quickly. And Biden certainly needs that because he seems very slow. He didn't organize well in Texas.
That's what money. That's what a lot of money and a lot of political consultants get. Right?
I mean, Bloomberg runs one of the biggest news and information operations in the world, and he has. When you look at what his campaign was, it was his business. He just brought these people over. The problem with Bloomberg was Bloomberg, right? He had these non-disclosure problems. He had this problem with stop and frisk. He had some pluses. I mean, a lot of people thought he did a very good job after 9/11, even though he wasn't even mayor. And then again, of course, the term limit issue where he bought himself into a third term. He was the problem, not the campaign. So what you're really doing is you're playing a kind of bait and switch. You get Bloomberg's money and Biden without the problems, but a stiff candidate who can't really run a good campaign, so you bring in the Bloomberg. That would be the marriage I think, you know, a Pelosi, a Schumer would love. It also means something that Donald Trump hates. He has Biden, who he doesn't want to run against, and he hates Bloomberg, and he's running really against two people. And the president can't control himself, whether it's on Twitter or just when he's out in front of a news camera. He will think he's running against Michael Bloomberg. I'll bet you that this marriage occurs, he'll be talking about Michael Bloomberg as much as Joe Biden. And another problem with Joe Biden, it constantly reminds the voters of the impeachment. If in fact the president really did say what he did on the phone, and I think he all but admitted it, he just said it wasn't impeachable, and I happen to probably agree with him on some of that. But what's really interesting is the fact that you can't go after Biden and his son without constantly reminding people of what you did. And that's not something I think the Republicans want, particularly down ballot. They would rather move on past the impeachment, the hoax or whatever it is. Throw in the coronavirus, and I think you now have what is, I think, about as close a race as you can possibly have, assuming that Bloomberg does what we're all suggesting he might do.
What is it going to take to marry the two candidates? What is it going to take to get Bloomberg to throw his support behind Biden and not just sort of independently put out his own ads thinking he's helping the party?
Donald Trump. If I were Donald Trump's handlers, I would just keep him quiet. Every time he roots for Bernie, he called up Bernie Sanders. Not called him up, but tweeted, congratulations. You don't need that. I mean, of course you want to run against Bernie. He is just, I mean, a consultant would have a field day with Democrat, socialists, you know, Fidel. I could write the ads. It's like shooting, you know, fish in a pond with you know, an M16. On the other hand, having somebody like Biden is a real problem for the president. And I'll give him credit. He knew that from the very get-go. I'm sure when he made that phone call, he said, if I can get that Hunter Biden team, I can really weaken this guy. He was also, I think, like the rest of us, certain that Biden was a favorite. He was, until he proved, just like in the 80s, he was a terrible candidate. He just doesn't run well. And for that reason, I think it was, I don't know if Donald Trump will give Bernie Sanders some money or maybe even give him some, you know, positives. But the truth of the matter is, it's Donald Trump. Bloomberg, I think, genuinely fears another term of Trump.
Let's get to Adam Bennett real quick. He's down at Election Central, and you've been watching those votes come in. Adam, what's the latest down there?
That's right, Russ. So about 45 minutes ago, that's when we saw the first election equipment, including the results, those mobile ballot box cards coming in. Here's another shipment coming in right now, being wheeled up the ramp. Came in about 45 minutes ago, about an hour and a half after the polls officially closed. But of course, anybody that's waiting in line was waiting in line at 7 o'clock. They are still allowed to vote. So the election judges are not able to deliver that equipment. They're not able to deliver those results until all of those people in line have voted. Now, as about 15 minutes ago, I was told by a county clerk staffer that about half of the polling places had closed. other people were still waiting in line. Now, a big question a lot of us have had tonight is why are the lines so long, especially with turnout similar to what we've seen in previous presidential primary years. Certainly it was a lot tonight, but the large crowds were expected. The county clerk told me that they were surprised by how many people showed up on election day to vote. She thinks that there were a lot of undecided voters, especially given the presidential race. On the Democratic side, a lot of people waiting to the last minute to cast their ballot, and she says that's what we're seeing right now. Now, she also pointed the finger at the way the process works. Remember, in the primaries, it's the parties that set the rules, and she says while the county wanted to do a system, a joint primary where anybody at any of these polling places could use any of the machines regardless of party, she said that that was not agreed to. She said the GOP did not want to do that, and that both parties ended up deciding to have an equal amount of machines at each of these polling sites. And she said because the ballots are programmed, this side is going to be the Democratic ballot, the other side will be the Republican ballot. They can't change it based on the demand and based on the number of people that show up. So they're pretty much more or less stuck with what they have, although they have been able to send some extra machines at the request of the election judges tonight. They've sent over 60 machines all to the Democratic primary locations, because even though these sites are split 50-50 in terms of the number of machines, or at least were when the night started out, Democratic votes have outnumbered Republican votes in Harris County by about 2 to 1. In some places, it's as high as 3 to 1. So that's where we're seeing a lot of these long lines. But going forward, I asked if, looking back on what's happened tonight, if there's anything that she would do differently. The county clerk told me, no, not really. She just hopes that in the future, the parties will consider having that joint primary where, again, people can vote at any of the machines regardless of party, because she's confident that that will speed things up. But now we're getting into the period that she calls rush hour for tabulating the votes from Election Day between about 9:30 to 11. We're really seeing a lot of these machines, a lot of these cards start to come in through here. Traffic has picked up a lot, and now they're going straight back into this very same building, into a different room, to the central counting station. They have more machines this time around. She said it takes a few minutes per card that they put in, and she's confident that we're really going to start seeing results pour in over about the next hour and a half or so after what's been a very long night for a lot of voters. We'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Adam, thanks very much. It's feeling like a long night.
It is. Let's go now live to Los Angeles, where Joe Biden is speaking.
Hello, 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 hello. It's a good night. It's a good night. And it seems to be getting even better. They don't call Super Tuesday for nothing. By the way, this is my little sister, Valerie, and I'm Jill's husband. Oh, no, this is no, you switched on me. This is my wife, this is my sister. They switched on me. Folks, it's still early, but things are looking awful, awful good. For those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign. Just a few days ago, the press and the pundits had declared the campaign dead. And then came South Carolina, and they had something to say about it. And we're told, well, when you got to Super Tuesday, it'd be over. Well, it may be over for the other guy. Tell that to the folks in Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Minnesota, and maybe even Massachusetts. It's too close to call. We're still waiting for Texas and California, a few other small states to come in. But it's looking good. So I'm here to report we are very much alive. And make no mistake about it, this campaign that will send Donald Trump packing, this campaign is taking off. Join us. To those folks, listen, go to JoeBiden.com. Sign up, volunteer, contribute if you can. We need you, we want you, and there's a place for you in this campaign. People are talking about a revolution. We started a movement. We've increased turnout. The turnout's turned out for us. That can deliver us to a moment where we can do extraordinary things. Look, our agenda is bold, it's progressive, it's a vision where health care is affordable and available to everybody in America. Where we bring drug prices down under control with no more surprise billing. Access to hospitals in rural areas as well as urban areas. Access to care. A bold vision where we invest billions of dollars to find, and I promise you, cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. Standing up to and beating the NRA and the gun manufacturers. And leading the world to take on the existential threat of climate change. I'm going to start by rejoining an outfit I helped put together, the Paris Climate Accord, and we're going to move it a long way. A country where the quality of education will not depend on your zip code. Where we triple funding for low-income school districts, providing raises for teachers, full-time school for 3, 4, and 5 years old.
All right, Joe Biden in Los Angeles tonight.
Yeah, speaking of Los Angeles to his supporters, this Super Tuesday has proven to be a good night, projected to win 6 states. So all in all, this is good, and he seems energized, and of course his supporters very happy about the results so far tonight.
All about the delegates. He's in California. He expects to lose that state, but with 1,344 delegates up for grabs tonight in the Democratic Party, it's all about the numbers and how many of those you can get. He'll get some out of California. Marcelino Benito, you're watching that delegate count because that's all that matters.
He looks pretty happy, doesn't he, guys?
Yeah,
and he has reason to be when you look at the delegate math. Going into tonight, he was down by about 5 delegates, but you can see, yes, California hasn't voted, it hasn't closed, so that'll obviously change. But the math doesn't lie. We were talking about Bloomberg earlier. You can see where he is. 19 delegates after spending $500 million. That is a pretty big failure for the Bloomberg campaign. He hasn't even reached Buttigieg, who won a couple states and just backed out of the race a few days ago. Biden is leading right now with 302. There are 2 states he's still leading in, and that's Massachusetts and Maine, which nobody really expected him to be competitive in ahead of today. And he's ahead of Sanders, who has 193 delegates. Again, we want to stress Sanders is doing very well here in Texas. He may very well win Texas, so this number will change, and it's very likely that at the end of the night, Sanders will hop over Biden and be ahead in the delegate race. But as we've discussed all night, guys, it was about keeping it tight. The tighter Joe Biden can keep it, the better it is for his campaign, and the more Bernie Sanders will have some reason to sweat as this nomination fight moves forward. Guys?
It's turned into a 2-man race.
It sure is, real quick.
After tonight.
All right, Marcelino, thank you. You know, we're just hearing in our ear, we took Joe Biden speaking in Los Angeles that someone had rushed the stage and apparently security tackled that person, but some overzealous supporters out there.
Yeah, nobody hurt, and the vice president is still speaking out there in L.A. tonight before the vote is revealed in California. That's the big one, 415 delegates, 228 here in Texas as well. So one of the races we haven't shown you any numbers on, and we're looking at the Harris County District Attorney right now. I want to go to that. I wanted to also talk about the Congressional District 7 race. So we'll keep that, just keep that graphic up there, but we don't have any numbers for this yet on a graphic, but that is Lizzie Fletcher's district, the Democratic incumbent. This is the Energy Corridor. This is the former seat that George H.W. Bush held back in the day, but a Democrat has it now. This is her first term, and there are several Republicans trying to beat her on Election Day.
Yeah, and to essentially take back that seat. You remember that she defeated multi-term incumbent John Culbertson back in 2018. So a lot of folks in this race. It sounds like Wesley Hunt is the front runner as of now, I believe, with 62%. Was that the numbers that we got?
Yeah, 62 for Wesley Hunt. 28 for Cindy Siegel. Do we need to go to Janelle right now? Yes. We do. Let's go to Janelle Bluter right now at the Democratic Party festivities tonight.
So It's getting very exciting here at the Democratic Watch Party. Got Commissioner Rodney Ellis here with me. Congratulations. So far, your numbers are looking very good. Tell me a little bit about how you're feeling tonight.
Well, early voting is in. It's 71% for our campaign, 29% for the other side. It's still early, but I think it would be very difficult to overcome that. Not impossible. You never say never, but I feel good about it. It was a tough campaign. A lot of mud was thrown. We managed to stay above the fray. I know politics is a contact sport, but we were lucky. We managed to keep it clean, and so far, it paid off to do that.
Perfect. And so tell me just a little bit about, going forward, if you do take the term, what are you looking forward to?
Well, over the last year, you've seen a much more thoughtful and progressive commissioner's court. It's just like having a lens of equity on how we distribute flood control dollars, making sure we come up with a program so more people can participate and do business with the county, particularly our minority populations and our women-owned businesses. We're going to do that. We're going to look at putting more worker protections in. So we're going to give someone a tax break. We want to ask, what incentives can you give to make sure people can make a livable wage? We're going to look at how we expand more health care to people. A whole host of challenges. We have the strongest regulations for building going forward that we've ever had in our region. And it's a model, I think, for the rest of the state. But look, here's the real issue. The biggest challenge for us is what we do about climate change and about those people who are left behind. That big gap between those who have and those who don't have is a real challenge for us going forward. We've got to bring more people into the middle class. And that means government plays a role in investing and incentivizing getting people to help them get out of the lower income strata.
And tell me, you looking around here at the Democratic Watch Party, you guys have a lot of support here so far. The numbers keep growing. And the voter turnout, I don't know if people are still waiting in line to vote. What does that tell you about the future of the party, especially here in Harris County?
It means that we got to invest more in the infrastructure of voting, and we got to learn from some mistakes that were made this go around to do a better job of predicting where people will go and know all of the nuances in the law. So once we decide to go to these mega centers where you could go anywhere and vote anywhere in the county, the law that passed this last session says both parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, have to agree. And sometimes if one party thinks it advantages them more than the other, they can be a little selfish. So we should have opened up more mega voting centers. Next go around, we're going to have to do some kind of a survey to get a sense of where people are going to have the longest lines. And we got to do a better job of encouraging people, go vote early. And at some point change state law, so if you change your mind, it's the last vote that matters. Sometimes people don't want to vote early because they want to see who's winning in the presidential primary race, and then they may change their vote. But we got to get people out voting early. So with these crowds today, we had 2 weeks of early voting. We got to encourage people to take advantage of it, and the mail-in ballots.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner. Congratulations on the results so far. We look forward to hearing from you soon. All right, thank you so much. Yeah, guys, so like I said, lots of excitement still here at the Democratic Watch Party. A lot of people still turning up as they watch those results come in. We've seen Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee stop by. County Judge Lena Hidalgo was also here. Just lots of excitement, but we'll check back in with you guys in a little bit.
All right, Janelle, thank you so much. Okay, back here in the studio, we were talking about District 22 and those results coming through. Walk us through those, Bob.
Well, I think what you're seeing basically is something Vladdy said, which is Troy's now, Fort Bend is core of that. It's probably about 40%, maybe as high as half, but he has a commanding lead. It's only a question of who's in the runoff, and I think it's Kathleen Wall. I don't think Pierce Bush. I was looking at these numbers in Harris County, and Pierce Bush in the early vote only got 400 more votes.
Vlad, do these numbers surprise you at all?
Given where we're at this point of the evening, not necessarily. That said, there's not a whole lot more that's going to come out of Harris County. So really the numbers that we're looking for are going to come out mostly from Fort Bend, but even Brazoria County hasn't reported very much. This is still very, very low count at this point, and there's not a whole lot of information to really make a firm decision, except for Troy Neal's. That's just an insurmountable lead at this point.
But the other three there, because we're going to top two runoff unless Troy Nels can do 50 plus 1. So of those three left, Kathleen Wall, Pierce Bush, Greg Hill, is it still anybody's race to see who gets in the runoff there, in your opinion, or is this decided?
At this point, it depends on where the votes started coming from. Kathleen Wall is doing a lot better in Harris County, so it depends on how much more she gets out of Fort Bend and Brazoria. So there's still a lot of room for all three of those to make the runoff. But Kathleen has a really strong lead. It all depends on how well she holds on to that lead.
What do you think is pushing Troy Nails up to the top? Is it name recognition? Because obviously he's doing very well in the county where he was sheriff for several years.
It's a combination of name recognition and a combination of mobilizing probably the machine that he's already had in place.
I mean, he's the only one there on that list who's consistently been on the ballot over the last 4 to 6 years, and he's got a lot of good press. I mean, any press is good, whether it's controversial or not, but he's been on the ballot.
But you also
Kathleen Wall's never been on the ballot in that district. Pierce Bush hasn't been. Greg Hill has. There are others on there, but you want to talk about a guy who actually won votes, raised money, and won. On top of which his brother.
He has a political organization. Yeah. In that area.
I mean, here's the question: could he win it outright? 20% of, let's say, 100, maybe. Well, I imagine that's going to break anywhere near 60, 70,000 votes right now. So do the math. If it holds up, I don't know where the vote's coming from. It could get close to 100,000. Could Nels get 51%? I'm not ruling it out.
Yep.
But that means in a runoff, he walks in with,
I have a question for Vlad, actually. You know, a couple of weeks ago we were covering the special election for that state House seat, and Troy Nails was out there campaigning, and in all of his campaign literature, all his pamphlets, he's really tried to forge a tight-knit bond, or appear to have a tight-knit bond with the president, Donald Trump. How big a role does that play in this primary? Have the others done the same?
Well, they've all done the same. Kathleen Wall's, all her ads are very closely trying. I mean, her ad is, "This wall will build the wall." So it's like you can't get much, there's no distance there. Pierce Bush has also been very clear that he supports the president's policies on a wide array of issues. Troy Nails, in a way, he's maximizing his attachment and his approach with President Trump because he's trying to mobilize that base. He realizes that in a Republican primary, he's going to have as many of them turn out as possible. And at this point, in politics, President Trump defines the Republican brand, and so Troy Nails is trying to make sure he leverages that as much as possible.
But boy, in such a diverse district, you have to wonder if that continues into November. I'm guessing not.
This is the dilemma of American
the general
politics.
election, no.
You win by winning your base. But if I showed you the distribution, it's U-shaped. There's Democrats in Fort Bend and Republicans. And Republicans are a little bit larger, but not as big as they used to be. No. There's really nobody in the middle. So if a guy like Troy Nails or any of these candidates, I don't think Pierce Bush, on a personal level, feels that comfortable with everything Donald Trump does. But if you want to win this nomination, the problem is winning the nomination doesn't predict how you'll do in November. Never has. So the real question is, how does a candidate like Troy Nails move and win some of those, I call them entrepreneurs, men and women in small businesses who are of color, particularly ethnics. And that's going to be a challenge for him. But I'll tell you, of those candidates, I put more of my money on Troy Nails doing it because he's been a county sheriff. So when you have to repo a car, when you have to take somebody who's in the apartment and get him out, this is a guy this is what county sheriffs do all the time. They oversee a whole bunch of constables. They have an organization. And they've won elections. So I think if you had to pick a candidate, if I were a Republican, I'd go with Troy Nails. He's proven product. Now, whether he can make that gap, reach that Democrat, I mean, sure, Kulkarni looks like he's going to get the nomination.
Right, and he lost to, Kulkarni lost to an incumbent by 2 points last time. Now it's an open seat.
Yeah, but it's a different world. Pete Olson wasn't Troy Nails. Pete Olson had, 2 or 3, sadly, heart attacks, another former student of mine. A wonderful guy, but I don't think Pete Olson ever had his heart in being a congressman. He spent as much time on a plane as he did in the district. Troy Nails has been in the district. He's not traveling to Austin. He's not traveling anywhere other than his constituents.
Let's go live now to Ron Trevino, who is in Richmond, talking to the Democrat who is leading in District 22. Ron, you there?
Yeah, we've moved to Sugar Land, and we're going to be talking to Sri Preston Kulkarni. How are you doing tonight? It looks like you're doing well. in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, so this is a great night for us, for the people of District 22, and it shows the power of inclusion, because this district was gerrymandered to be 2-to-1 Republican, one of the safest Republican districts in the country, and in 2018 we turned it into one of the most competitive districts in the country by being more inclusive, by reaching out to women who had never voted before, by reaching out to young people, and reaching out to immigrants, all of which are usually ignored. On the other side, you see what they're doing. Like we're running in 21 languages right now, and they are literally trying to be as divisive as possible, be as anti-immigrant as possible. And so that's why we're going to win in November, because this district is the most diverse district in the country, but being diverse is not the same thing as being inclusive. Diversity is what we are. Inclusion is what we're doing.
So you came close to beating Pete Olson a couple of years ago.
We did, and so we got within 4.9 points in a district that was supposed to be 2-to-1 Republican. And we did it by pulling out new communities. So last year, he dropped out of the race, and he turned one of the safest Republican districts into a toss-up, one of the most competitive in the entire country. And we're going full steam ahead. We're pulling out new people. We're registered almost 40,000 voters. We're campaigning literally in 21 different languages, and a lot of these people are voting for the very first time. That is the answer to the hatred, the hostility, the division that's spreading across this country, is more inclusion, uniting and inspiring people.
And of course, we're still looking at numbers. Do you think you're going to be in a runoff, or you're going to win it outright?
We're cautiously optimistic, but what I can say is the results tonight show the power of our communities, to show the power of inclusion. When we bring people together, good things happen.
Earlier this evening, we were at Troy Nail's campaign headquarters. He's very optimistic tonight. He says he's not going to have any problems in November if he ends up winning, because he may be in the runoff.
Sure, so I don't want to talk too much about other candidates before their race is called, but what I can say is that whatever divisiveness that they're spreading on the other side, and it happened across the campaign on the other side, we're going to be just as inclusive on our side.
Let's talk about Texas and the possibility of it turning blue. It was blue at one point, many years ago, when I was a young boy. But and then there's talk that it could turn blue again, and the importance of this particular district. Congressional District 22 playing a role in that.
So a lot of people don't know we have the largest population out of any district in America. So that means that we affect the U.S. Senate seat, we affect redistricting of up to 39 congressional seats in the House of Representatives for 10 years. We can affect the Electoral College. So there's a lot riding on this seat right now that is a toss-up race, and you can see that kind of attention. We've had multiple presidential candidates come down here, but what we're doing is all local, which is just literally pulling out people from communities, going to where they are, speaking to them, and especially listening to people who've never had anybody visit them before.
I mean, you could say the eyes of Texas will be on this race, but the eyes of America will be on this race.
Absolutely, and the kind of things that we're talking about. When we're talking about health care, reducing the cost of health care, my family almost went bankrupt when I was 19 years old because my dad got leukemia. That's something that everybody can relate to. When you have kids who are in school who are doing drills again and again for mass shooting. I had to go to a funeral last year for a girl who was murdered in her own school. When we have floods, 500-year floods, again and again. I lost my car a few months ago. These are all problems that people can relate to. It's very hard to relate to the division, to putting children in cages, taking 26,000 children away from their parents. That is something that nobody can relate to here. It's very hard to relate to saying that Nazis are very fine people. That's the extremism on the other side, and we're going to respond with more inclusion, more compassion, more decency.
And what would a Republican like about you if you're going to try to reach out and get some Republicans to vote for you?
Sure, absolutely. So this is a key question. It looks like about 15% of the people who voted for us were former Republicans or maybe current Republicans. We have Republican volunteers, Republican donors. So we are pro-growth, pro-jobs. For example, the economy here is based on oil and gas. We don't want to ban anything. What we want to do is expand the energy economy, do more wind, which we're already the leader of, and do more solar. Texas should be the leader in solar. High-speed rail. This could create hundreds of thousands of new jobs.
We're going to have to wrap it up. Congratulations to you so far. It looks like you're doing well tonight. Of course, you're going to have to maybe look at a runoff, perhaps, maybe not. And then, of course, the general election in November. And that's a different ball game.
Well, we're very optimistic.
Okay, thank you so much. Sri Preston Kulkarni. That's the situation out here in Sugar Land as we look at the various people in Congressional District 22, a very important race, not just in Texas, but in the nation. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Ron, thank you so much. Ron reporting live from Richmond.
Let's go to Marcelino Benito now and a new state.
A new state in the Sanders column. The state of Utah has been projected to go to Bernie Sanders. They are about 83% of the vote in, and you can see it's a pretty hefty lead. And what's interesting about Utah, no real surprise, Sanders expected to carry it, but it's who's in second place, a guy who will be reassessing his campaign tomorrow. He is viable here at 18%, so he will get delegates out of Utah. Not what he expected, I'm sure, across the country. Third place, Elizabeth Warren, who also appears to be viable, 15% if she can hold on. And Biden having a pretty good night. We've talked about Biden surging back, the comeback hit again. But in Utah, at least, in fourth place, and at the moment, below the 15% threshold. So he's hauled in delegates from a lot of states tonight, but at this point, unless things change with more vote coming in, he may not be getting delegates from the state of Utah. Guys?
All right, Marcelino, thanks. Did I see Marcelino on the big board here a minute ago? Did you have those numbers from the Lizzie Fletcher race, the Republicans?
We can look right here. Yes, we did.
Because those are our first numbers tonight. I want to take a look at those. And
that's District 7, right?
Right.
It is.
Okay, go here.
This is Wesley Hunt, a veteran, a West Point grad, a Iraq War veteran.
We got 5% precincts reporting, and there you see the numbers. Wesley Hunt with 61% of the vote right now. Cindy Siegel with 27.8%, and the rest far behind.
Does that surprise you guys that there may be an avoiding of a runoff here with Wesley Hunt going against Leslie Fletcher in the fall? Or did you expect that?
President endorsed Wesley Hunt.
Yeah.
Everybody endorsed Wesley Hunt. I did think that like Batty was saying, Jim Noteware and Cindy Siegel, former mayor of Bel Air, I would have thought there'd be more Republican votes west side, Bel Air, south side, the Rice University. But I don't think a lot of people in those areas vote in Republican primaries. And so I think what happened here was once Wesley Hunt got the endorsements, I guess Cornyn doesn't endorse when he's running, but Ted Cruz did, and that sent the right signal. I think Wesley Hunt, I thought he'd have trouble. He turns out to have voted in Democratic primaries. He's not shown up in a lot of Republican primaries. He's made some controversial remarks. This is a case of a bit of an inexperienced person, maybe in the military, but not as a candidate.
Yeah. How does he do against Lizzie Fletcher?
Well, this race was over the moment that President Trump endorsed Wesley Hunt. How does he do against Lizzie Fletcher? It's going to be a little bit more of an interesting dynamic, because you're going to have a candidate who's never campaigned before, who this is his first run, going against someone who was able to defeat a long-term incumbent.
11 terms.
Now, the problem is that the Democrats are going to pour in tons of money to do everything they can to hold that seat for Lizzie Fletcher. The question is, where does Wesley get his votes from? Because this is one of those districts that does not really vote strongly Republican. It's a suburban district. They supported John Culberson because he was not a very fire-breathing, right-wing, red meat Republican. They want somebody who's moderate, and Lizzie Fletcher has done a very good job of presenting herself as a moderate.
I'll tell you, the Republicans in that district are on the west side.
Energy corridor.
Yeah.
And they suffered terribly during Hurricane Harvey. They're in lawsuits galore with the Army Corps of Engineers and various authorities. The House is controlled by the Democrats. I'm going to bet they're going to hold on to the House. May not get the Senate, but they'll hold on to the House. They may even lose seats. But a voter out in that district knows who's been able to. She, and even John Culberson, talked about bringing back what we would call the pork barrel.
Right.
I think this is going to be a case where Wesley Hunt's going to have to run a really fine campaign. The only qualifier I think we have to say is who's at the top of the ticket. Had it been Bernie Sanders, I think that made it a lot easier for a Wesley Hunt to do well. If it's Joe Biden, I think or Michael Bloomberg, seems unlikely. Joe Biden, then I think this becomes a race where I think the incumbency and experience, and I think Wesley Hunt has proven not to be, how can I say, the greatest candidate. I don't know who's running his campaign, and I think the RNC will come in. And they may target this one as a pickup, but I'm not certain that they don't have a lot of money. That's the other thing. All that money is focusing on the presidential reelection, and it's not helping out the Republicans in the House.
She's a first-termer, and that's your best chance to knock somebody off after their first term.
Sophomore surge.
I just want to bring up something that has been brought to our attention regarding voting machines at TSU and them needing to be replaced. The Harris County clerk saying that almost all of the machines went down. They have to be replaced. She said we're talking 20-year technology here. She also kind of made a plea for joint primaries, saying, just have one line going forward in the next primary. I really hope that we can convince both parties to go to a joint primary. She said, my understanding is that the Democratic Party wanted the joint primary, but the Republican Party did not. So the parties run the primaries, and they get what they want. This is an issue they're hoping to mitigate obviously in time for the runoff and in November. But we saw long lines earlier out today. I know that TSU, as of 9:15, had very long lines. It's 9:48 now, so I'm sure they've gone down. Polls closed at 7. We shouldn't be seeing these kinds of lines, and especially not during a primary. What do you guys think of that, about what the Harris County Clerk was saying?
Maybe I'm missing something. I thought we had joint primaries. All of the voting for Democratic and Republican primaries was at the same location, and then on Election Day, wherever you wanted to go. It's not like they did it in Brazoria, where you went into a different room or a different building. When you went in and checked in to vote, you then said which party primary you wanted to vote in.
Right.
And other than that, whisper to the county election official. So that's my first question. Second, I can understand why the turnout is higher on Election Day and why they got fooled, if that's the right word. I think weather made a difference, but I think the big one was when we see the votes get it up, we're going to see 60% or more of the vote cast on Election Day.
Yeah.
This could be the vote centers. Vote centers are early voting on Election Day, and the people who want to make their decisions and not waste their vote, like you were saying, wait till Election Day. And maybe this was the mistake that the clerk made. I don't know if it was a mistake. It's hard to figure out when people are going to make their minds about candidates. I had thought most voters would have voted early.
Well, you would think that the modeling and the forecasting would have accounted for the fact that the turnout was lower, given what we probably should have expected for both parties, especially on the Republican side, during early voting, that there should have been a surge like we typically see for Election Day. But this is kind of like a reflection of what happened in November, where it's just
I think it's what's happening in the. I mean, come November, the county clerk runs 751 Election Day polling places, 52 early voting locations. To give you an idea of how many that is, LA County, which is the largest, has half as many. 350 polling locations.
Wow.
Gotcha.
Now, I'll tell you what the other problem is. In LA, when Dean Logan runs it, I know him well, he'll have 350 polling locations, and guess where they are? They're at Walmarts. They're at big box locations with lots of parking. One of the things my students and I and my colleagues have studied is where people vote. And Houston and Harris County is not a good place. Stan will tell you this, the former clerk. To get Wi-Fi in, because we now allow people to vote anywhere, you've got to be in certain locations. Stan actually figured out what the pattern was for different Wi-Fi. It's hard to run elections, and we don't invest in it. And as a result, we can have these kinds of problems.
And we got to let it go here, guys, because what we're going to do, I want to let all of our viewers know here digitally what we're going to do. We're going to give you some numbers leading up to just about 10 o'clock. Then we're going to simulcast our TV side news starting at 10 o'clock. So.
All right, and again, if you are looking for election results, you can always text us at 713-526-1111. Text the word results, and we will be sending those to you. Thank you so much to both of you. We're going to continue our coverage. Bob Stein, Vlad Davidiak. I'm glad I got your name right finally.
I only had to say it once tonight, but it's been a lot of fun, guys.
Awesome.
It's been a lot of
really
fun doing this digital thing. So
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yes.
I've heard about you.
Thanks.
We appreciate it. So keep watching the numbers here. We'll scroll those for the next 7 or 8 minutes or so, and then we'll get you to our newscast on the TV side, simulcast digitally, coming up here at 10 o'clock.